let me put the microphone on as well. So at this point, we don't have IT to rectify the situation, which they may or may not be able to anyways. We have 3 what we call God mics, this 1, 2, and 3. So during the delegations will go into mic 3. And then if a councillor has a question, get my eye, put your hand up. I'm going to put you on a list, and then you can come up to mic 2 and then ask the question there. And then Jeff will relinquish his seat for the questions. Yeah, he'll slide over or something like that. And then for those in Zoom land whose technology is working flawlessly today, I might add, you guys, same old, but again, if you put your hand up and we haven't recognized it here, please feel free to nudge us once in a while if you need to get us back on track. All right, so hopefully everybody is good for that. Yeah, it'll come back, but then it'll go. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for your patience this evening as we tried to take care of those gremlins. I'd like to just start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of our land, and we're much appreciative of that. Councillor Helene is going to read out an acknowledgement as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, Courtenay Council would like to acknowledge the deaths of 33 Comox Valley community members in the period of January and December 2023 due to the unregulated toxic drug supply crisis. A total of 175 deaths of Comox Valley community members since the public health emergency was first declared. I hope I speak for all of our residents when I say that our hearts go out to the loved ones of those we have lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Helene. Appreciate you reading out those tragic numbers. I just want to also mention that today Council is going to be considering the 2024-2028 financial plan. Oh, so I can cross that off.
No, we're considering next meeting.
Oh, right. That we're going to be considering that on February 28th, 2 weeks from now. The next council meeting, February 28th, regular council meeting will start at 12:30 p.m. and council will review the budget starting at 4 p.m. Council meetings are open to the public. If you can attend the meetings in person, we do meet at the CBRD Civic Room at 770 Harmson Avenue, or you can view us online at the City of Courtenay YouTube channel. Thanks for that. All right, I don't believe we have introductions. Oh, late item.
Thanks, Mayor. Would like to add to the agenda 4.3, a delegation. The package was attached to the agenda. Delegation by Dana Forksgren, probably pronounced that wrong, on working towards system change, accessing Courtenay's approach to homelessness.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been seconded. Thanks very much for that. And Dana is in the gallery today. And does that mean it's going to start working? My mic just turned off, so we'll see. Sorry, I do see Dana in the audience. It has been first and seconded. If there are any comments, you'll have to come up to the microphone, or if you're online, just raise your hand. Otherwise, seeing no questions or comments, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Okay, so 4.3, Dana, you'll be coming up right after the Brazilian Cultural Foundation. All right, thanks for that, Councillor Jolicoeur. Moving back to our adoption of minutes, 3.1, if somebody would like to move that. Excellent. Are there any errors or omissions? See none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously, and we'll move into our delegations. And again, for those delegating today, if you could come up and maybe I'll have you sit next to me here and use this microphone as the podium is not functioning 100%. So we're going to start with Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce and Tracy Clark. I'll leave a chocolate here for you in case you would like one. Yeah. Oh, the clicker. We'll have this all sorted out by the end of the night. Or in 2 weeks.
Happy to be the guinea pig for the other delegation.
Fair enough. I'll just turn your microphone on.
Thank you for having the Chamber of Commerce. I appreciate being here and being able to talk to you guys about a plan that we've cooked up that we can work together for the better of all. Today, I'm here to talk to you about a business recruitment and expansion program. And we're going to be going through several phases of the project. And to explain it, I've broken it down as such. So we'll talk about the project phases. We'll talk about our communication and our procurement strategy and how this aligns with our priorities and the city's priorities. And it wouldn't be a big project without challenges. So we'll talk about how we may deal with what may come up. We'll look at the project budget, and also we'll be talking about some funding independence and funding agility. This project will be strategically phased over 3 years. And the work will be done in compliance with the Chamber's fair and equitable procurement strategy. There's going to be lots of opportunities for us to work together. And we're going to be talking about why we are ideal partners for this. So what are we doing? How and to what end? It's been a while since we've had our finger on the pulse of the business community. So we're going to be looking to find out what that looks like for the current business practitioners, what they need and how we can help them. The action will be the bulk of the project. And my clicker is not working. There we go. So let's talk about the project phases. Phase 1 will be engagement and consultation. We'll start with this right out the gate. This is where we engage with community leaders, not-for-profits, and service groups, and discuss what is the best approach. We'll also hire a consultant to help us with the polling of the project during this time. Phase 2 will be data collection and analysis. We expect this will take 3 months. And we'll do a fulsome data collection and then look at that. This will move us into the third phase, where we analyze the data and make recommendations. At that same time, we report back to those first groups that we engaged with. The fourth phase of this is our action plan. So this is the bulk of the plan occurring from month 6 to the end of the 3-year time period. This is where we implement and make all the actions. So let's talk about that. This is where the real work begins in response to the stated needs of the business community. And we will react in accordance to what we've heard from them. This 2 3/4 year plan is designed to address the key themes that we've discovered and that make sure that those align with both the chamber and the municipality's strategic plans. We expect this action to have various components that will support and grow the business community. So anticipating what some of these components may be, we expect that the business community will benefit from the development of an online resource library. So the goal here is to create a comprehensive online resource library on our own website that businesses can access when they need help. Concurrently, we'll also develop some strategies for entrepreneurial support so we can foster the growth and success of the business community. At the same time, we'll be holding various networking events to strengthen connections with the local business community. We find the best things happen when we're in the room together. As well, we'd like to expect to produce some small business training and startup advice, filling the gaps that may exist in the business community. We'd also like to offer some recruitment and awareness campaign. So this is where we look elsewhere to people who aren't in the community, recruiting people to come in and fill those gaps that may exist. So the goal here is to promote the Comox Valley as an ideal location for new businesses, staff to come in, as well as remote workers. A unique component of this plan that we expect to produce are wellness events. So these will have the end goal of enhancing work-life balance and well-being for business professionals. Finally, the last component that we expect to offer is workforce support. So this will be supporting the local workforce by collaborating with local groups such as the Immigration Welcome Center, North Island College, and others. Let's talk about our communication strategy. It's really important that we get lots of buy-in when we're communicating this, especially with the 3 months of polling that we're doing. So it's our goal to hear from as many people as possible, and this will be an all hands on deck opportunity. So we'll utilize our own information channels, such as our newsletter, our website, and social media to regularly update the community. And also we hope to collaborate with you. Use your communication channels to reach a wider audience and to engage the residents. We also plan to utilize local news agencies, both press releases and purchasing ads. This will all be done in accordance with the Chamber of Commerce bylaws to ensure a fair and equitable allocation of resources. I hope you get excited for part 4. This is a plan to walk through the municipalities where we plan to engage both chamber staff and you, City Council, on the ground, going and talking face to face with the local business community. Let's talk about the strategic alignments that can occur here. So as you can see, the Chamber has several core values: community, member focus, leadership, and inclusivity. This is what we bring to the table. This is how we operate, and we know that these align with your strategies as well. We would also like to point out some other alliances here with your OCP. I'm sure you know that document in and out, so I'm just going to summarize where these meet up. So these meet up with your business retention, development, and investment plans, LE 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This also meets with your objective for local economic development opportunities, LE 7 and 8. And your objective 3 for municipal regulations and services, LE 11, 12, 14, and 15. And as I said earlier, no big project would happen without some challenges, and it's better to anticipate what those are going in so we can try to solve them together as they happen. So a possible challenge could be data collection. It's important to us to ensure a high rate of response from business owners, and the polling phase, this may be a challenge that we occur. So a strategy that we plan to implement could be incentives and community engagement. Community buy-in. Gaining support from arts and services groups and ensuring they actively contribute to the program will happen in phase 1. This will require dedicated effort in relationship building, but we already have strong community connections in this area. Another possible challenge is resource allocation. Although the Chamber manages our budget and we ensure that expenses are effectively utilized, We have a monthly budget to actuals check-in, and our financials are overseen both by a bookkeeper, treasurer, and our board of directors. We will also make a financial reporting plan that meets your needs. Another challenge that may happen is a changing business environment. We know the only constant is change, so external factors such as policy changes, economic changes, they may impact our program's recommendations, and we will promise to be flexible to adapt to these. So this is our proposed project budget. It spans over 3 years. The bulk of the expense in the first year is hiring a consultant to complete the polling. We're proposing that this project is undertaken in cooperation with the town of Comox. And we're also proposing and suggesting that you split the cost based on the breakdown of population. So 65% of the cost carried by the city of Courtenay, 35% carried by the town of Comox. So while we're talking about money, it's also important to us to talk about funding independence. And we need to ensure transparency and accountability. We want to be sure to separate our advocacy role from this funding request. We want to make sure that the funding is tied solely to the work and activities within the program, and that it should not be contingent or affected by the Chamber's advocacy efforts on any challenging or controversial issues that may come up. We also want to be sure that we have the freedom to advocate. We reserve the right to advocate on behalf of our members and the local business community when necessary. We may have to address challenging or controversial issues that come up in the best interest of our constituents. And we want to ensure that our advocacy efforts will remain separate and independent from this funding request. So how do we make sure that we're on track? We promise to come to you twice a year for biannual check-ins, providing a detailed overview of progress, milestones, discussing any challenges that may come up, and discussing any adjustments that may need to happen to the plan. We also promise to be adaptive. If new information comes up or circumstances arise, we may have to adjust the proposal. And we also want to talk about funding agility. So if program modifications require additional resources, we need to work collaboratively with you, our program funders, to ensure that the proposed budget increases align with your protocols, your checks and balances. We do acknowledge the importance of proper financial oversight and decision-making within the funding framework. So to conclude, thank you for listening to our 3-year proposal. And we would like to complete an action plan that responds to the stated needs of the business community, and to do so with our funding partners. Are there any questions?
Excellent. I'd have you push buttons, but I don't want it to blow up anything because those mics don't work. But I do have Councillor Frisch, Councillor Morin, Councillor McCollum online. So maybe we'll start with Councillor McCollum online.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate going first because it's currently not much background noise where I am. Thanks for the presentation, Tracy. This was really great to see this kind of detail laid out. And I think the Chamber is really well positioned to provide this kind of initiative in our community. So my general sense from this is that our business community and our community as a whole could really benefit from some of what's laid out here. And my question for you is, I'm just wanting to have a better understanding of what that data collection piece would look like, what type of data we're envisioning, and if we're looking more at kind of open-ended questions and themes, or if we're looking for more numerical data, or just if you've gotten that far in considering exactly what that would look like, or if that's going to be dependent on the work with the consultant further down the line.
Thank you, Councillor McCollum. I appreciate the question. That's a really good question. And that's something that we've thought a lot about. And that's where the phase one comes in, where we're consulting with our community stakeholders to be sure that we're asking the right kind of questions. So we're happy to include council in that strategic piece as well. So we're getting the answers that can help us build that action. So our goals would be, to answer your question, both. We're looking for data and numbers, as well as looking for open-ended answers. So it'll be questions like, we want to find out how people are doing, how we can help, and how we can support them.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Councillor McCollum, for the question, and move on to Councillor Frisch.
Someone?
Yeah, just push it in here.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, appreciate the presentation. I guess I was wondering what the conversation was like at the chamber that led you guys to this idea of taking this on, recruitment and retention.
Well, we know that thank you, Frisch, for the Councillor Frisch, for the question, and I appreciate that. It's a really good question. We know that there is a current local gap in the economic development sector, and we feel that the chamber is uniquely positioned to do that work and to get those answers for you. However, we want to really streamline the focus of this project into recruitment and retention. Retention is a lot of the work that the chamber already does, helping businesses thrive. And recruitment is a piece that we're embarking on in partnership with the town and the city to help fill those gaps that may exist in our community.
Sure. And so when you gotta do it again. So when you talk about a gap in the economic situation in the valley, are you talking more about recruitment and specific businesses or opportunities for labor, or are you talking about more on the retention side and supporting businesses?
I think they're two separate pieces. So the retention side is helping ensure businesses are continuing to thrive, and the recruitment piece is finding those gaps and filling them. So we hear that people are having a hard time with childcare. We know that there may be leakage in other economic areas, so we're happy to discover what those are and then form a strategy around that over the next 3 years.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the questions.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And next I had Councillor Warren. Oh, okay. Councillor Jolicoeur. And if you scooched a little bit this way, you'll get caught by the camera.
It's very
And then-
intimate. This is
And
great.
apparently, if you stop talking for more than 30 seconds.
Great way
your
to be
microphone
collaborative
will-
is to be close to
Yeah.
each other, right?
And if you
Anyways.
stop talking for 30 seconds, your mic will automatically turn off. So
Okay, good to know. And thanks, Mayor, and through the chair, thanks for the presentation, Tracy, and for the good work that obviously went into this for the development of the proposal. I really see this as a key driver for a lot of my peers, people, young families in the community, new people to the community who are really trying to understand the landscape of the business community more generally. I was really excited to see the piece around wellness. We know that our small business owners and their staff are quite stressed. There's a lot of stresses on our businesses right now in an evolving social and environmental landscape and the economic impacts of the world right now. And so really happy to see that. I guess I just really have two technical questions. One was why my understanding of the Comox Valley Chamber is Comox Valley as a whole. And so this plan is for Courtenay and Comox. So just curious why Cumberland and the regional areas were not included in that. And then my second question was around the advocacy piece. And I appreciate that you put that in because I guess I'm curious if you foresee there to be any tension points between the findings and what will be in the action plan and any kind of advocacy activities that the chamber does with the city, for example.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Jolicoeur. I appreciate those insights, and I'm happy that you appreciate the value of the wellness offerings. I'm really excited to bring those. We have some creative ideas that we're gonna make happen there. To answer your last question first, why only the Comox? Why only Courtenay and Comox? We're happy to start a conversation with the CVRD and Cumberland as well. I think it's good to start here. Because we know the bulk of the population is in Courtenay and Comox. And the advocacy piece, That was a part of the plan that was important to my board. We don't anticipate anything big coming up that we're going to have to fight about. But we think it's important just to say that right off the bat and to be totally transparent and to clarify that we do stand for the business community no matter what, and we're there to have those hard conversations if we need to. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, the microphones are very prone to turn themselves off. Just a reminder for our delegations, just ask one question at a time, just so that they can answer and keep it all tight, and you can ask a second question later. But I just want to remind our council of that, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Cole Hamilton online.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation, Tracy. This is a really interesting and exciting plan. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on Councillor Jolicoeur's question. You said you might be approaching Cumberland and the regional district at a later point. The allocation is currently based upon sort of 100% of the funding allocated between Courtenay and Comox by population. Would there be, I assume, some sort of recalibration of the amounts and re-estimation if you're going to be going to other councils? I'm just curious about how that would be done.
Thank you, Councillor Cole Hamilton. That's currently not part of our plan at this time, but my answer earlier, and I could be more clear, is that we're open to working with the entire region. At this time, it's not part of the plan.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I don't usually participate in a delegation, but following up on the question, these conversations have been ongoing following the completion of the Comox Valley Economic Development Society service review and the subsequent decision at the board. Very positive conversations, and at the CAO level, amongst the 4 communities, we've had a variety of conversations about where people may look for opportunities to work together. And I believe generally out of that service review was a message to, on an ad hoc basis, find partnerships and opportunities to work together. And so at a staff level, we've been working through that, and that's why you have a proposal together. I would anticipate if the entirety of the region wants to participate, there'd be adjustment, the budget would have to be larger, et cetera, but the sharing would still be a good portion of that. So I just wanted to add that for council's information.
Okay, we're going to do a test. Would you like to push? We did some stuff here, and I believe it's now working.
Can you hear me? Oh, wow. That's great. I don't have to go up to the front. It was starting to look like, I don't know, Dr. Phil or something up there. I was expecting some, disclosure of something. So my question, I guess, is this proposal is involving obviously the business community and chamber members. And I wondered if there's a piece of it that is more broadly towards the public, because business folks may have ideas around, I'm particularly looking at the recruitment side of things, that the general public might say, well, actually, we want more of this kind of business coming in, and it doesn't align at all with the business community necessarily. So I guess I'm wondering about that aspect. Thanks.
I really appreciate that question, Councillor Warren. Thank you so much. And I realized that I wasn't totally clear on who the poll is going to. Anyone can respond to the poll. And although the chamber is a member organization, we represent the business community as a whole, whether or not they're a member of ours. And we will appreciate getting feedback from the greater community, because it's only the people that live and work and play here that can tell us what they need and what's not already here.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Warren, for the question and making sure our microphones are now functioning, hopefully much better. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Tracy, I noticed that you didn't mention Comox First Nation at all. Is that a deliberate omission, or was that somehow inadvertent?
Thank you for mentioning that. We're happy to include the Comox First Nation in this plan, although I haven't done so yet, but we're happy to include them in phase 1 of the collaborative conversations.
Yeah, I think it's certainly worth you talking that through with your team, because I mean, they are not only a key member of the community already in terms of local governance, but with moving to treaty, they're going to become an even bigger economic player in the valley in the years ahead.
I
So-
appreciate that, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to collaborate with them. I know they have their own economic development function there, and I'm happy to enrich that relationship.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And now the microphones aren't even turning themselves off. All the ticky boxes, I think, have been pressed. I don't see any further questions or comments, but I do just want to say that, we've had a pretty tumultuous 4 years or so. We had the pandemic, we had the Economic Recovery Task Force, which the whole community came together, including Comox First Nation and our base. But really since then, we've been in a very much reactive mode. So for me, it's really great to see the sort of proactive sort of phase that we're going into potentially. I usually start, and I didn't today, but usually I was a bit discombobulated, but we usually start just letting delegations know that we don't necessarily make decisions, and we often try not to make decisions on the same day as a delegation. But be rest assured, this will be coming back to council for us to make a decision sometime in the near future.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. And thanks for being flexible with our technical challenges today. And with that, you have yourself a great afternoon.
Thank you. Am I returning this to the podium, or do we think the podium works?
You can take that back to the
Okay.
podium. Jeff will help out there. And with that, we're going to move on to the Brazilian Cultural Foundation. And if the Alicia Fennell, if you'd like to approach the podium and just press the button up there, and if all goes well, I'll be able to turn that on. And with
Hello.
that, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Alicia Fennell, and today I'm here to represent the Brazilian Cultural Foundation. The Brazilian Cultural Foundation was founded in Victoria by Kevin Brett, originally of Merville, and he started that foundation back in 2012. If we can go to the next slide.
And you have a clicker up there.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
I didn't
And
know
in a
that.
perfect world, if you press forward.
Okay, we might be coming back to this slide shortly. So the Brazilian Cultural Foundation is a not-for-profit foundation promoting Brazilian and Afro-Brazilian culture in Canada specifically. We facilitate teaching, performing, and mostly we put on huge international events every year. It funds the teachers, the travel expenses, and, it actually also helps elevate artists from around the world and locally. One of our key cultural providers or cultural performers is from Brazil himself. And he's part of the reason that that the Brazilian Cultural Foundation exists. He became a Canadian citizen. I don't know exactly what year, but he came to Vancouver in the 80s for the Children's Art Festival and performed for them, and then decided he wanted to be Canadian. And he was naturalized into Canada through a program that we don't have anymore, unfortunately, that was supporting artists to live in Canada and work in Canada. So every year we put on events. Of course, the pandemic has set us back hugely. Our biggest event was called Fight for the Cause, and it was in Victoria. And this was an incredible community event that was raising money for all kinds of different local charities. And it was in collaboration with Studio 4, which is Kevin Brett's academy down in Victoria. And they would invite community members to compete in the ring, the boxing ring. And this was a black tie event. They would sell VIP tickets, dinner, dance, live music, Brazilian dance. We would often bring masters from Brazil for it. And they would raise $40,000 to $60,000 at these events. We also, of course, put on yearly events celebrating Brazilian culture and music, which if anybody's ever been to one of those events, they'll know just how rich and amazing they are. So this year, we have put on 2 large international events already here in the Comox Valley, 2015 and 2019, in which we had probably about 300 visitors, 200 to 300 visitors coming to the Valley with their students. And this year we are really excited to work in conjunction with the Comox First Nation, the Kamugwe Cultural Society. Thank you to Melinda Knox for being our mentor and for suggesting this to happen. It's always been a dream of mine to make this happen, actually, to share the cultures, the Indigenous cultures of Brazil and of our local cultures. So this year we are collaborating with the Kamugwe Cultural Society and presenting an intercultural celebration at the Big House on the Comox Reserve on March 16th. We're bringing 6 masters of the Brazilian art form of capoeira. We are bringing over 20 performers of dance and music. And as you can see on the slide here, the entrance will be free. We don't know how public it can be because we can only hold 300 people in the Big House, but it will be all members of the cultural groups, the 2 cultural groups engaging, plus private sponsors and their families, and hopefully mayor and council as well of the Courtenay and Comox Council, as well as CVRD. Yeah, so next we have our leaders. I already talked about our master, Mestre Bahão, and you might have seen points there about our culture, the Brazilian culture, and the Brazilian Foundation helping to bring people out of poverty. Mestre Bahão himself, he did that pretty much on his own, but he still helps to do that in Brazil. He was born to a single mother, 8 siblings, no hydro, no running water, and now he is the leader of an international capoeira group with over 200,000 or more members all over the world. So he'll be one of our key guests. And then, of course, we have Andy Everson and all of the Kamugwe Cultural Society dancers. Of course, Professora Aurinha de Jesus, who's a traditional Afro-Brazilian dancer from Recife. Mestre Kokoroka, who has never been here before. We're really excited to bring him. He is from Rio de Janeiro. And of course, our local Mestre Testa, or Kevin Brett, who's originally from Merville, BC, and runs the group and is the director of the Brazilian Cultural Society himself. Budget. So yes, this event particularly is in conjunction with our 15-year celebration of capoeira in the Comox Valley. And this is just sort of an overview of what we're expecting for the budget for this event. The highest expenses will be artist fees. Then we have administration that may or may not be paid out to the people organizing. Travel, of course, is a big cost, accommodation, food, and otherwise. We do have partners in the community: Butcher's Block, Sure Copy, Milano, Makalani. Gosh, we have quite a few more partners. I can't even list them all, who are sponsoring the event as well. Accommodations, we've been, at this point, we've been using Airbnbs because of the proximity to our venues. We've rented the Comox Rec Center at their not-for-profit rate. We've also rented the École, I might screw this up, École de Lille as well, their gymnasium. And of course, we have the big house venue for the Saturday. There's just some pictures of our group and the members looking happy and benefiting from participating. And that concludes.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And it feels like our technology is no longer an issue tonight. So that's fantastic. Probably shouldn't have said that, but a great presentation. And I'll now pass it over to any councillors that have questions, starting with Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks very much. Sounds a wonderful event. I'm just curious though, it seems that you've done all the planning and now you're looking for the money. Isn't that kind of backwards?
Like I say, Melinda Knox is she's my mentor. And I am not very proficient with the funding aspects of, this is my first time really actually looking for any funding for the event at all. In years past, we have funded the event through ticket sales through the Sid Williams Theatre. So that was a big one. Sid Williams is very hard to book. It's a couple of years out now, so we weren't able to access those funds. And really, I'm plowing the way here, learning from Melinda how to even ask for money. I'm quite new to this process, to tell you the truth.
Okay, and it looked like from the numbers on your pie chart there, it was about $20,000. Is that roughly the amount?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those are numbers that were sectioned off from, so the budget was for the entire event, which included the workshops, the 3 days, master's workshops for the students who will be arriving from all over Canada. And so I sectioned off part of the budget for that evening. So some of that money will be coming from registrations from the students as well as private partnerships. In the
Okay,
valley.
so how much are you asking for from us?
Tonight, we're asking for 5,000.
Okay.
Yeah, just to try to, take some of the edge off of some of the expenses that have gone up quite a bit this year, like accommodation, food, travel.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And you may want to go back to that slide because you did have a slide that said 5,000. I think it articulated kind of what that would be going towards.
Oh, yes. I didn't even get to that, did I? Yes. So yeah, mostly to feeding and housing the leaders, the cultural leaders, the rental of the Comox Hall. And we are going to be doing a dinner for all the performers that night as well. And of course, transportation for the guests.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian, for the question. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for the presentation. This sounds like a really exciting event, really good, enriching to the Comox Valley. I was noticing on your budget slide, it talks about having received a CVRD general grant.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was wondering if you talked to the other local governments in the, or if you're planning to in the Comox Valley, Comox and Cumberland, to seek support, as this seems to be sort of a valley-wide type of initiative.
Yes, so the timing of the event is not perfect. If it were an event in August or October, we would have been good to apply for some of the cultural grants that are offered. I think there's an event grant out there through the Arts Council. I did approach Town of Comox, and they basically said they really didn't have anything in their funds for that. But we're always going to be seeking funds for events like this. I think they're really important in the valley here. Thank you for your question, by the way.
Okay, and just maybe a small follow-up is I'm not sure if you've run across the Comox Valley Society for Diversity and Cultural Awareness. They put on a remarkably wonderful Diwali event back in November, and I was wondering if you'd, probably not for funding as they're just getting started, but if you'd made any connections with them in terms of organizing.
No, but that would be a really good connection for me to have, I'm sure. I would love to connect. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll find a way of getting the email of Ashutosh Shekhawat, who's one of the main organizers to you, and perhaps that could be a useful connection.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your
Sure.
questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for the presentation. I agree, it looks like a really interesting and diverse event that you're putting together. My question was also around funding and funding sources, and I appreciate that you included that there is a general CVRD grant that was received, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on which grant that was. And the reason I'm asking is that I know that there's a recreation arts and culture grant that we just passed a budget on it yesterday at the Rec Commission, and it does have a specific amount for events coming up through the year, so it's not so tied to timing. So I just wanted to confirm whether or not the CVRD grant is that particular grant, and if you could let us know what type of funding you've received, or how much the funding is that you've received from the CVRD.
So thank you for your question, Melanie. The funding that we received from CVRD was not actually the one that you had mentioned. Basically, we met with them at the end of the year last year, and again, they were, same question, why are you asking so late? Again, it was a timing issue of applying for the grants because I only decided to run this event in March last year, and a lot of the grants were closed. And again, I was just learning about the funding that might be out there as an option. Essentially, I met with the CVRD at the end of November, at the end of their fiscal year, I believe it was, and they basically just all looked into their funds and saw what they could find and just contributed what they had left. I believe some of that was cultural funding, allotted to cultural funding. But I can't actually answer that question specifically. I could very easily send out an email and get the answers to those questions, though.
It was $20,000.
Yes, sorry, it was $20,000. Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, it was $20,000 that was already received from the CVRD for the project?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
thanks, Councillor McCollum, for the question. And I don't see any further questions, but really do appreciate the well, not just the presentation, but all the work that I know goes into these things. I worked in the arts community for many years here, and when you said March 16th, I was like, whoa, that's tight. And as I mentioned earlier, we generally don't contemplate a request at a delegations meeting, but rather after the fact. That being said, and you may have already gone to the Community Foundation, but if not, I highly recommend they may or may not have something. Also, there are 5 Rotary clubs in town, and they may be a source of some support there as well. So that's the 2 things that I can kind of off the top of my head so to say, but it sounds like you've done well, I would have to say, given the short amount of time and again, this being your first sort of kick of the can, and you have I think a pretty awesome mentor. I wish I had Melinda as a mentor myself. So she is certainly a powerhouse. So a great person to have in your corner. And I think with that, I'll thank you for your presentation and wish you all the best.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you very much for your time. And I just also wanted to acknowledge the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's March in Vancouver today. I think it's really important to I acknowledge that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, and with that, we'll invite Dana up to the podium. It may just take a second to get the so it's PDF. So I shouldn't laugh, but stupid computers. I think it's okay now, right? Oh, you have to click in the upper left-hand corner. Way up, way up. Upper left. Yeah, that one, yeah. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Do you have the clicker in hand? Excellent. Okay, Dana, thank you so much for your efforts on this, and we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I want to tell you that I'm genuinely thankful for being able to come here today and present. And I know that I was added on to your council meeting today last minute, so I really appreciate it. Before I begin, I would like to express gratitude for the mayors and councillors for your communication in recent weeks, specifically with several of you coming to meet with community members who are experiencing homelessness and hearing from them directly. Slide, please.
So go back to there should be an option. There's probably so under view. I see what says monitors automatically. Comparison.
Anyway, should be 3 screens.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then from the also they've got it. I think we're just gonna have to continue on. Sorry, we're. Nope. All right.
I think it's just one slide before this one.
Okay.
Is it showing up for you? Okay, I'll continue.
I spoke too soon. My apologies.
Oh,
The gremlins are back.
So my delegation today will provide a short introduction, an overview of the current situation of homelessness in Courtenay, and some considerations to achieve more clarity and equity in the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw number 3121. I'll also be reflecting on how we can work together to maintain Courtenay's strategic goals. I'm going to continue the presentation, and if the slides come back up, fantastic.
I think we may have a workaround here. So
Okay. I'm going to share a statement from someone in our community. I'm over 70 years old and I cannot keep one thing. This is ridiculous. I spent my life working and now I'm walking the streets with nowhere to go and with nothing. I want to discuss today an urgent concern regarding the state of homelessness in our community. The Comox Valley 2023 point in time count revealed a troubling increase in homelessness since 2020, particularly with Indigenous people, seniors, the 2S LGBTQIA+ individuals, and persons with disabilities who are disproportionately affected. I would like to share two statements from yesterday's newly released report by the Federal Housing Advocate. The Federal Housing Advocate defines encampments as temporary outdoor campsites on public property. This is what they said.
Sheila.
Councillor McCollum or Cole Hamilton, I believe your microphone may be on.
So this is coming from the Federal Housing Advocate report that was released yesterday. First, encampment residents are at dire risk of harm due to the failure to uphold their basic rights. Second, the encampments exist only because of a larger systematic failure to uphold the right of all people to adequate housing without discrimination. Research informed by the lived experiences of individuals facing homelessness stresses that legislation and policies can exacerbate the challenges by further criminalizing, marginalizing, and stigmatizing people experiencing homelessness. Slide, please. Oh, we're good. My purpose here today is to seek further engagement and consultation regarding Bylaw 3121. And to propose some specific considerations and amendments before its implementation. This statement in front of you is from one of the voices who lives the reality of homelessness day in and day out. I tried to read the bylaw, but it didn't make sense. It's confusing and it makes it hard for me to be comfortable anywhere. And where are we supposed to go when we get kicked out of a park? Our stuff is soaking wet and dirty. What can we do with it? It's impossible to pack it up. My objective today is not to negate the progressive aspects of Courtney's proposed bylaw 3121, but to build upon them for a more inclusive approach that supports all members of our community. I want to bring attention to how the language within bylaw number 3121 might inadvertently contribute to the already dire conditions for those experiencing homelessness. I want to acknowledge the disproportionate numbers of Indigenous people experiencing homelessness in the Comox Valley. 30% of those experiencing homelessness identify as Indigenous. For this, I want to highlight the importance of consulting Indigenous partners in the city's decision-making and policy-making processes. Our obligations under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, should not be ignored. City regulations that contribute to homelessness among Indigenous individuals infringe upon Indigenous rights to adequate housing, non-discrimination, and self-determination. Reconciliation is more than just a catchphrase. It requires real action that demonstrates our commitment to respecting and supporting Indigenous rights and well-being. Knowing this unequal representation of Indigenous people and homelessness in our community, we can see that this bylaw holds significant implications for Indigenous people. It is imperative that we acknowledge and address this through genuine consultation. Just a quick word on reasonable adjustments. They are not a privilege. They are not intended to be annoying or to create extra work for other people. They are a human right. System change through policy and bylaw reform can have the power to shift cultural norms, promote empathy, and create lasting impact. As we discuss this bylaw, it's important to consider how it will impact individuals experiencing homelessness. Let's approach this issue with empathy and understanding, taking into account the real-life challenges it may present for them. Language is important, and the language used within bylaw number 3121 may have a profound impact on the lives of our community members experiencing homelessness. I would like to present a few of the amendments that have been created in consultation with legal advocates. These have already been provided to the council and to the mayor. Number one, the term offensive behavior in section 5.9b is too vague and could be unfairly applied. This leaves room for subjective interpretation. Removing the word offensive will help prevent any bias that might unfairly impact people experiencing homelessness. Section 5.10 C and D state that it is prohibited to obstruct or interfere with the duties of city employees in a park or open space. These rules are often used to restrict advocates and observers during city operations, which unfairly impacts public engagement and advocacy. We recommend amendments to make it clear that just asking questions or advocating for someone shouldn't count as interference. Lastly, requiring temporary shelters to be constantly occupied for 14 hours from 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. does not take into consideration the realities faced by homeless individuals. Basic needs like food or using the restroom need to be accommodated without fear of repercussion. Section 5.10 addresses interactions between city employees and the public. However, it lacks clarity on the expected conduct by bylaw officers. We propose integrating language from the bylaw compliance policy to ensure consistent expectations for officers. We also urge the council to include explicit language on trauma-informed enforcement. This ensures sensitivity towards vulnerable individuals who may have experienced trauma. Implementing these amendments demonstrates our commitment to fostering positive interactions and upholding principles of respect and inclusivity. Our proposed amendment to Section 5.8 aims to align park regulations with modern harm reduction strategies. Currently, the bylaw prohibits cannabis consumption, smoking, and vaping in parks, which may inadvertently impact our city's harm reduction efforts and eliminate therapeutic options. We wish the council to reconsider prohibition and recognize cannabis's medicinal uses and harm reduction benefits. Our amendment proposes regulated consumption areas in parks, aligning with the CVRD substance use strategy. This approach prioritizes public health while respecting individual rights and needs. In bylaw section 10.2, I would like to address an enforcement issue. Currently written, this section permits any city personnel potentially untrained to support officers and enforce the bylaw. This poses risks to both the public and to themselves. I would like to propose 2 amendments. Remove the provision to ensure that only trained officials are enforcing the bylaws. Include language that welcomes collaboration with social support services in enforcement. This aids individuals who are experiencing homelessness. These changes ensure effective, safe, and fair enforcement practices while enhancing our community's well-being. In conclusion, these proposed amendments to Bylaw 3121 align with our city's commitment to creating an inclusive and united community. Prioritizing consultation, engagement, and relationship building will reaffirm Courtney's dedication to equitable systems and operations. These amendments guarantee that every voice, especially those of marginalized communities, is heard and respected. As stated by Marie-Jose Houle in yesterday's newly released report from the Federal Housing Advocate, change depends on all of us working at all levels, starting within our own communities. In our efforts to address homelessness, we must understand the importance of collaboration. Bylaw 3121 can be the start of system change where every individual is valued, supported, and uplifted. Thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Dana, for your presentation today. It's much appreciated, and I'm just going to wait to see if any questions arise. Again, I know council, many councilors have, if not spoken with you, texted, emailed, etc. So really appreciate your communication over the past few weeks. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to get a clarification because the questions I have are primarily for staff, but I think we'll have an opportunity for that later on the agenda. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
And Councillor Frisch.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. The question I have is about your perception of the bylaw and what role it will play in the either the helping people who are living on the street or the hindrance of people living on the street to reintegrate into society, into housing, into a situation that's healthier. What do you see as the role of this bylaw? Like how big of a deal is this bylaw for that process?
So for the experience of those who are unable to access housing currently, it has a huge impact. And I think this is what we're hearing. We've been hearing this throughout the year. And the language is not supporting changes that are going to shift this support for those who are unfortunately impacted by not having affordable housing. And those are individuals who are not able to compete for housing. And a lot of this is due to bias, and it's due to their circumstances, perhaps having a disability. And so I think it does have a very big impact. And I see from the reports that have come out, including yesterday's report from the Federal Housing Advocate, is that this is coming out across Canada, and we're going to see some major changes very soon.
Thanks. And can I have a follow-up? And so I wonder what your thoughts are around those who might fear that if we allow something like daytime camping, for instance, and maybe I'll just recognize, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, that the population that's homelessness and living on the street isn't really homogenous. It's not one type of person. In fact, I imagine everyone has a very different experience, is maybe in a different place, has different abilities. And I wonder what your response would be to people who say, well, look, if we allow people to camp during the day, that could lead to a camp situation like we've seen in other communities. And not only are those places perhaps uncomfortable or unsafe for the general public once that happens, but they may in fact be unsafe for the people living in them. Of course, if you have nowhere to live, it's hard to argue that that's the worst of it. But what are your thoughts about that point of view?
I think the bylaw amendments we're speaking about today don't address this, but I think the opinion of, I can share my opinion about that. And I think that a lot of, if we are seeing people uncomfortable with the idea, and we also have to look at priorities, and we have to look at where people are coming from in their own privilege. Those who are experiencing homelessness right now are, a majority of those are people who, like any of us, it could be any one of our own relatives. And because they don't have houses, they are living in tents and sheltering at parks. And during the day, they have to carry all their items with them all day long. This doesn't promote someone being able to find stability and to work on rebuilding their lives. And so I do think that it's a major impact for someone to have to go through what they are doing in our community. From what I've seen, no one wants to be in that situation, and it's not their fault. This is a systematic issue.
Thank you for that.
All right, thanks. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Dana, and the report that's attached. I'd encourage citizens who are curious and interested about this topic. There's quite a lot of background research that you provided here around the current situation of homelessness in the Comox Valley. You know, that we had that report come to council a few months ago from the point in time count, and you highlighted it in your presentation around the disproportionate representation of Indigenous people. We're looking at almost 30% of our unhoused population identifies Indigenous. And so I appreciate that one of your first recommendations is to do further engagement with our Indigenous partners in the community. And particularly also noticing that one of the key things that I've kind of seen throughout the recommendations and the amendments, and that's something that in the year and a half I've been in this role, I haven't seen as much correspondence that actually provides solutions to what we're considering. And so I really appreciate that effort and the time that's gone in. And you also bring forward people's lived experience through some of those quotes. But I'm curious if you can speak to a little bit of what I spoke to when this came to council for first and second reading was really the human rights perspective. And that's kind of sprinkled across your report, and also some language you're suggesting that we include in some amendments. And I'm wondering if you can, and you did share the Federal Housing Advocates comments recently around this unfortunate reality that Canadians are facing within our communities right now. But if you can speak to what you see as the practical impacts of us having a bylaw that explicitly mentions the human rights of all individuals within the bylaw itself.
Can you reframe the question? Just
human rights, and
yes,
why it's important that we actually recognize human rights in the bylaw.
Okay.
Right,
Thank
we've had
you so
lots of
much.
conversation around human rights, but specifically the recommendations that include some amendments to include human rights.
Absolutely. And I think we're all seeing across Canada that this is a phenomena that we've never experienced before with homelessness. And so this is new for every community, but it's being it's being experienced in every community. And these demographics are very similar in every community. And so I think that right there shows how important it is to have the language supporting those who are being most impacted by the bylaws. In many communities, the percentage of people who are experiencing homelessness, the Indigenous community is the most impacted. That's always a very high number. And that really shows that the systems we currently have in place are not protecting those individuals in particular. And again, we always see in every community, those who are being impacted are those with disabilities, with mental health issues, the LGBTQ community. So I think we're seeing this disproportionate impact, and that our laws need to make sure that we are being equitable in how we protect people and provide affordable housing, or in the meantime, a safe space and a place of acceptance and empathy for the situation that they are in.
Thank you. That's it, Mayor. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I'll just go to the folks online. If you had any questions, I'm not seeing any hands, but just want to make sure everyone's okay out there. And any further questions from councillors? Seeing none, again, just want to say thanks a lot for all the work that you've done over the last couple of weeks to get prepared for this. And we do have this on the agenda as an item coming up. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
All right. And with that, we'll move into our Comox Valley RCMP report on the second and third quarters of 2023. And I think we have Sergeant Kilborn. I hope the title is close. Staff Sergeant, you know, I know about 50% of the time what it says is very close, but I appreciate that. So Staff Sergeant, I'll pass the podium over to you.
Thank you very much. I also have Staff Sergeant Beauregard with me as the operations NCO at the detachment. Thank you for the opportunity to review the quarterly reports from quarter three. As you'll notice, it covers October 1st to December 31st, which our fiscal year runs April to April.
All right. And I guess, do you have the clicker there?
Oh, I do.
Let's see if it works.
There we go.
All right.
Yeah, so as you can see, we begin with our calls for service, and that's spread out over the last few years here. You can see we're just very slightly up by 5 calls for service, and that encompasses every single call for service in the Comox Valley RCMP for Courtenay. And I would just, I'm not sure, Mayor, if people want to interject with questions while we're presenting the slides or save them till after. I think we're open to either.
You know, if there's a burning question, but I think at this point, yeah, we'll probably try to keep it to the end, and then just because we've got people online as well, so it's be a bit chaotic just for me wrangling everything. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
Here our analyst has pulled the most common call types in Courtenay. At the top is the check well-being, and I might just add some clarity to that it can encompass anything from checking on a person who appears to be, you know, down in the street and non-responsive, to someone calling in their grandmother who they haven't heard from in a week. And so we don't parse the occurrences any finer than that. So it actually encompasses quite a few different responses. And then we've got a significant increase in the calls for unwanted persons. And again, these are all calls that come in from the public. And so we're not self-generating a lot of these files. It's calls that we get to our operational communication center. So this is most common call locations, excluding our RCMP detachment. Oh, sorry, did someone have a question? Just a mic?
Okay, someone just came unmuted accidentally, I think. Okay.
Most common call locations, excluding our own detachment address. And the number one call location we have in the city of Courtenay is 685 Cliff Avenue, as it shows, and there's quite an increase over 2022. Followed by the Superstore, the hospital, the provincial courthouse, the Washington Apartments, Driftwood Mall, the library, and Walmart. And I just wanted to address the setting or the field that says Courtenay. And so what that is because the statistics are pulled from two separate areas. So when we pull our offense statistics, what it comes from is what's called our general occurrence form. And so that is generated after an officer gets a call and they go to the call and then they determine what type of thing is happening. And then they classify it accordingly and put it through our records management system. And that's how it tracks the offenses. This call locations is pulled from what's called our CAD calls. And so those are calls that come into the 911 center, but don't necessarily have a specific address associated to them for whatever reason. Either they don't quite know where it's occurring or what have you. And so the, obviously the calls from the general occurrence would be a little more accurate in terms of location, but it's just the way the statistics are pulled. Then the most common downtown calls for service, you can see your unwanted persons, check well-being, and so on. Traffic incidents, theft, weapons, mischief. Sorry, that slide is a little small. Violent crime is a particular concern to us. Obviously, it's a public safety issue for the police, so it's a particular concern. And we noticed a few increases and a few decreases. The assaults is a numerically significant increase, I would say, to 473 files. It's a lot of assaults. It also includes harassment, sex offenses, and there's some decrease that we've seen in sex offenses, and we can't really explain that one per se. And a lot of these, I should point out that the numbers are the numbers, and sometimes we just can't provide the reasons why. But it's just a lens into what we're seeing as the police. Here's a so-called heat map, I guess, of the map of violent crime by areas of Courtenay. And you can see in general terms, it centralizes in the central part of Courtenay and then decreases as you sort of move away from the center. For the types of property crime we're seeing, just going to flip to my materials because that's a little far for me without my glasses. Is mischief to property continues to be sort of the largest driver of that, and it's actually down 4%. Shoplifting is slightly down, other theft slightly down. Frauds and theft from vehicles are significantly down, and again, not quite.
Sorry, I think somebody's I think they're disconnecting, reconnecting, and their mics are on when they're connecting. So sure.
Yeah, and again, I'm not quite sure what the reason is behind those two items, why they seem to be down quite a bit. Still a significant number numerically, I would say. And whoops, sorry about that. Map of property crime by area. So again, you can see roughly the darker is the higher frequency of the property crime, and it decreases as you get out from the center of the downtown core. The Controlled Drugs and Substance Act offenses, we're seeing a decrease in those with the decriminalization efforts. So I think that one we're pretty safe to explain why the number is quite a bit lower. The drug trafficking is very slightly up, and that's the focus of our drug enforcement now is drug trafficking. And Traffic offenses, still quite a few. They're up 13%. The dangerous operation of a motor vehicle is up 140%. It looks like the prior year might have been a blip of 5 because it seems 12 is more consistent with the previous years. So I don't know what the reason is for the growth over last year. And then motor vehicle incidents is up quite a bit, but numerically not that significant. So this passed from May long weekend until September long weekend. We conducted a number of foot patrols. So there are a total of 24 8-hour shifts. And we offered actually slightly more than that to our members, and it was all on an overtime basis. And so the purpose of it was to be visible downtown and conduct patrols primarily downtown, but also parks and other areas. And so we had a really good success rate with that. And our members really bought into the concept of that. So as you can see, so they're above the members' regularly scheduled shifts and focusing on the weekends primarily. And then we only had a few shifts that we had offered go unfilled. So it was a very high uptake on that by our members. So in total, we made 23 arrests for various matters, including individuals with outstanding arrest warrants and in responding to crimes in progress. So it really provided a quick response to anything that happened downtown, and they're able to either observe things or intervene when called upon. We did 43 additional patrols of the various parks that are laid out there. And in addition, we made 105 business inquiries with different businesses. And so many of them were frequented multiple times. In all, there was 70 police files that were generated for crimes in progress and shoplifting, theft from vehicle, in progress assaults, illegal camping, causing a disturbance, and consuming liquor in public. In addition, we had a lot of good anecdotal commentary by the members of the Business Association. As members were going through the businesses, they received many positive comments, glad to see our members. And it's a program we are definitely planning to repeat because I think it was a good success. And we're just examining the numbers right now to see if we can expand it slightly to start a bit earlier and have a few more shifts available. The primary concern, honestly, from a detachment commander's perspective is our people are very tasked already. And so this is all on an overtime basis. And when people work too much overtime, they tend to get a little burned out. So that's one of my concerns, but people seem to have the capacity to work the shifts. And while that exists, we'll take advantage of that.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks very much. And I think that's the last slide.
That is the last slide.
Fantastic. You don't see it, but we have a motion that does speak to the foot patrols for this year. So, but I'm not sure if online anybody had any questions. And I can, Councillor Morin, did you want to give me 1 second?
I mean, I saw that the number of calls was pretty consistent with last year. It was up just five calls. And then it was actually a decrease from 2021. But the violent crime, as you mentioned, there were some increases there as well as some decreases. I guess it's always tricky because we don't know, you know, when we hear violent crime, obviously it's very concerning. We don't have anything that really teases out what that means exactly. Sometimes there's a perception in the public that those are random attacks of violence, which again, we don't know necessarily, because I know you don't collect all that information necessarily, that those are folks who know each other and are having a conflict or whatever. I don't know if there's anything more you can say about that piece. And I did have also wondering about the extortion being up 136%.
Yeah, so sorry, I'll just jump in. So the 5 files that I think the term the statisticians uses, it's insignificant, statistically insignificant over that many files. So it could have gone either way. Violent crime, your first part of the question, sort of anything listed in that offense, those offenses that are listed right there, those are the violent crimes. Everything else is property related, persons related, those sorts of things. I think in the extortion, I think we discussed it in the last council meeting. I think we can mostly attribute that to a lot of the online sort of sextortion.
Yeah.
Scams. It would be driving those numbers up.
And anecdotally, I think I can probably add that there's not too many of these crimes that are like random attacks, I would say. A lot of times they're people known to each other or associated in some way.
And we wouldn't have a code for it to easily draw up random or not random. It would have to be delved into each individual file to answer that question. So bit onerous to do that. There's not a automatic way to do it.
Could I have a quick follow-up?
Yep.
I'm wondering if during that period of May to September when the foot patrols were happening, because I know not all of these are broken down into months. I'm wondering if you saw a drop in any of those, you know, violent crimes, any of the crimes.
Well, I don't think we parse it out that way, but I would say because a lot of the violent crimes are up, you know, and the ones that are down are typically not ones that would be like the sex offenses that would be sort of impacted by our foot patrols. You know, it's hard to really speculate on that.
And those foot patrols are only a couple times a week for 6 hours a day.
Right.
So there's still a gigantic portion of time that they're not in effect, right?
Right.
This is a sort of.
But I guess those foot patrols are being very successful in helping folks feel like there's a presence and that maybe a better feeling of safety because you're out and about.
I would like to say that because the police are there, it would cut down on these offenses. But it's hard to say by the statistics for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. And yeah, I know when I think maybe it was my first police report 9 or so years ago, we did ask about that known versus unknown component, which would be really useful for us. But I think all of that data stuff is all federally kind of mandated, and so they wouldn't change it just for our little municipality here. But do appreciate. Especially when if something has some sort of gets some media coverage, that's usually articulated quite well generally in those circumstances. With that, I'll pass it over to Councillor Killian.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for coming today, officers. Some of the statistics are quite staggering, and in particular, the number of calls in 2023 that end up with police attending in the area of the warming center, where we see the numbers go up from 128 to 464. Now, I know that every time the police attend somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody gets arrested. You haven't actually given us your arrest numbers, but the foot patrol arrests are the only place that you did mention that. And I mean, they weren't particularly significant in terms of the number of arrests that you'd make over the course of a year. But nonetheless, I know a lot of the time the police attend and basically they help to sort something out and then carry on. Oftentimes they attend and something has already happened. So it's maybe a matter of reassuring people or whatever. But what I'm wondering, our perception is that people who frequent the area of the warming center are probably more likely to be victimized than many people in the community. And I'm wondering if you have any way of knowing how many of those 464 calls are related to victimization of the individuals themselves who are frequenting that area versus complaints from, for example, shopkeepers in the neighborhood or others that might have a concern.
Right. I think I would start by just saying that Troy alerted me to the fact that the warming center was closed in 2022 for some portion of the year. Is that correct? So that may blunt the numbers somewhat.
Well, they still dropped pretty significantly. Yeah. And of course, we know that the numbers of people that don't have a place to live has increased very significantly over the last few years. And yeah, that's a big part of the reason why we're also overwhelmed with the challenges that that this presents, not least of which the challenges to those people themselves.
And to answer your question, you know what, I believe that this is a vulnerable population for sure down there. We don't necessarily parse out the, you know, the vulnerability of a victim in our offenses. So the, you know, the numbers may be drawn out by the offense types somewhat, and you could, you know, maybe speculate as to the types of offenses that are being committed as to the, you know, the state of the person being committed against. But again, it's, we don't thread it out that way, and it'd be hard to say without sort of speculating.
Right. And the other thing that I did want to ask was, you know, the phrase unwanted person jumps out at me as well. And, you know, I'm sure all of us have unwanted persons in our lives. Wouldn't it be nice if we could call the police to deal with some of them?
So we do. We do get those calls too.
Yeah, but I'm guessing this is mainly, again, businesses who have somebody kind of hanging about who they may be worried is going to steal something, or is there something else going on? And of course, I hearken back to the meeting we had with the downtown business people about 1.5 years ago, you know, where we had shopkeepers who worked in their stores on their own saying, what do I do if somebody is having a mental health crisis in my store? Is that the type of thing that we're talking about when we use that term, when the police get a call saying unwanted person?
I would say it depends, because the behavior of the person might dictate a different call. It might be a check well-being call for a call like that. But it could be anything from a person sleeping in the doorway to someone selling something outside of business that people don't like, or on the street, or a busker that people don't want there. You know, the language behind it is, you know, it's provincially mandated police reporting language. And so I recognize it can be sort of loaded, but it's the sort of the language that's been chosen. So, but
Yes,
yeah.
the codes is actually, it's called Universal Crime Reporting Codes, UCR codes. It's actually across Canada. So it's not like something that we came up with as the Comox Valley RCMP. So we can compare apples to apples across the country, you know, community to community, region to region. So those are, like I said, UCR codes are federal wide, nationwide.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's primarily what I wanted to ask about. I mean, I know that we're all looking forward to the PAC program rolling out in the next few months, and hoping that that will provide an alternative to police involvement in some of these, at least some of these situations. But appreciate that there's a lot for your folks to do, and you know, if we could somehow get more people with a place to live, so they weren't living on the street. Our hope still is to get a purpose-built shelter that isn't located downtown, so that we can actually close the Connect Center, knowing that it's totally inadequate for the purpose that it's serving. And so it would certainly help if we had those services in place and didn't need to have that as a focal point for police calls. So thanks very much.
And sort of add to your previous question, sort of kudos to our members. Like we're an example we were just discussing today in regards to other issues that we probably push forward more what we'll call reports to Crown Council or charges of them, let's say West Shore area, those major.
Sorry, I'm not quite hearing you, sir.
Sorry, that our members are doing, I'm just trying to do a little bit of kudos to our members because they're doing pretty exemplary work, and that we probably push out as many or more reports to Crown Council, like go through with full investigations and recommend charges to Crown than some much larger communities. So, and again, as you discussed about, there is a lot of discretion that goes on from our members. So like you alluded to, we do get a call, we'll go to sort of that court process, the rest charges kind of a last resort, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, the situation is dictated and such that, yeah, it needs to be pushed forward to a court process, so.
Well, yeah, and I know how much your members love doing all the paperwork that's involved to take somebody to court, so.
That's why everybody joins the police, right?
Yeah.
Do paperwork.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just to add one more point to that is that, you know, looking forward to the PAC, we're very behind anything. As everyone knows, the police are mostly a downstream sort of agency. We deal with things that have already happened and we don't really have a chance to intervene on the proactive side in that way. And so we're very behind all of the upstream efforts that might happen to sort of minimize the chances of they have to deal with police, because it is, like Troy says, it's a kind of a last resort, right?
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. Nice to see you gentlemen again. And I do recall one of the, just some follow-up to Councillor Morin's comments around the relationship between victim and perpetrator. I do recall at a previous quarterly update that you shared that anecdotally that most people do know each other. And so I think that was cause for some relief, because there's a lot of, I think, just general consensus in the community that there's a lot of acts of random violence. And so I guess one of the technical questions, I appreciate that you spoke to Courtney on page 3 of the report and what that represents. But the other question I had, simply because if the members of the public are, I know I'm interested, one of the highest increases was I think 111% increase on mischief caused by act or omission under types of property crime. And we, you know, council hears from members of the public quite frequently around property crime and perceptions of risk to property crime as a result of kind of the social dynamics we're experiencing across Canada right now. But I'm wondering if you can speak specifically to this increase about mischief caused by act and omission, and what some examples of what that could be.
I'll defer to my crime reporting code expert.
Sure, so.
It's 95 files this year versus
Yeah, it's just crime or mischief by act or omission versus property crime.
So really, so mischief by act, mischief to property. Think of somebody's keying your car, right? Somebody throw a rock through your window. Mischief by act or omission, somebody's yelling, swearing on the street corner in the act of doing something not to your property, right? Mischief by act or omission could also include potentially public mischief as well. Some false reportings, things like that. But those don't happen too often, or caught somewhere else. So having that much of an increase definitely is a concern. Again, to speak to it is difficult to do so.
The criminal code definition of mischief is quite wide. So it could be directed at a specific thing, or it could be there's a loss of enjoyment of property. That's one classification of mischief. So your neighbor constantly playing loud music at 4 a.m. for weeks on end, you know, could be a mischief charge. But it's, you know, interfering with the lawful enjoyment of someone's property, and that's classified as a mischief, and that would fall under this code as well, like by act or omission.
Yeah,
Mischief
thanks.
to property, also tagging, vandalism, those types of things.
Just one more question, Mayor, if that's okay. Yeah, happy, positive. One of the few positives in this report is that most of the types of violent crimes have decreased. But obviously the one that stands out is 136% increase in the last report we spoke, and we got some comments from you on the extortion, and you spoke about sextortion specifically. This is quite concerning. The 26 in a community of the size of Courtney, this is big. And I guess I'm curious if you can speak to any of the demographics. I recall you saying that at a previous meeting that there's a lot of issues in high schools. I just wonder, in terms, it would be good for us to know we have a relationship with the school district, for example, or any type of other partners that we have in the community, whether it be the Transition Society or others who might be working with vulnerable individuals, whether it be youth or women or others. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to and share any kind of demographical trends you're seeing in that 26 files this past year.
Yeah, you know, I think it's one of those things that there is no real, I mean, we'd have to delve into the data to answer that question. But anecdotally, again, it could be anybody, anywhere, anybody using a computer, right? So you have phishing attempts, you know, the PH. You have hackers out there, that's what they're looking for. They're just trying to catch somebody, lure them in a conversation, and then, you know, get them in a compromising position, and then you know, ask for money, or else I'm going to release these images of you or whatnot to your friends, family, etc. Right? And there was a lot of PSAs that are out there by us, other police agencies, to combat that. Let people know you need to be safe online. You know, you need to know who you're talking to, but it's, and a lot of it's driven very difficult to enforce because it's an unknown person, fake IP addresses. It could be using VPNs, fake IPs, all these different things. Very difficult to enforce or to investigate. So education is a huge component when it comes out. I know we have run some stuff, and I know there are things that are run through our school liaisons as well in the schools to make youth aware of these. You know, just internet safety for youth and everybody, right? So cautionary tale, I mean, we've all read the horrendous stories online. And yeah, the more information we can get out from there for people to be aware of what you're doing with your online activities and to be safe is encouraged, right?
And I've seen victims from senior citizens to high school kids. So it does run the gamut a little bit. Like we had one investigation here that involved a Comox victim. And there was a suspect in the States that was arrested and sentenced to a lot of time in prison, but they had 75 victims. It's horrible. And so it's a big trend. Our school liaison officer spends a lot of time educating people and hopefully trying to prevent some of it. And that's something I think we plan on getting more into the media in the future to sort of educate people. And it's a huge, unfortunately, a huge trend.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur, for the question. And I don't see any further questions or comments at this point. You know, having just spent a couple of meetings last week with our local downtown business improvement association, there was definitely a resounding yes for the downtown patrols that happened, the foot patrols. Again, just that feeling that you could see people out there, and then again, speaking to some of the arrests that happened, and really the ability, I think, and I think maybe the officers felt this as well. We're able to communicate to people without the duress of a stressful situation, so you can really be that much more proactive on things rather than just being reactive and in a much more kind of contentious situation. So with that, your presentation is done, but we do have a motion. I'm not sure if anybody is Councillor Warren.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that council rate the RCMP requesting implementation of the downtown foot patrol program on an ongoing basis from April 1st to Labor Day weekend, and that all costs related to this service be included in the 2024 financial plan.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. You guys don't have to speak to it. It's just while you're here today, and with the conversations we've had with the BIA, and there's been some conversations happening as well about possibly trying to start it a little bit earlier. And so this just gives us, as we're going through our financial plan, it gives us the opportunity to make sure we're on top of it. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
And we appreciate the support.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, generally supportive of this. I guess I don't think I've seen yet a motion like this without a staff report, and there's nothing in our agenda about this other than the printed one that we have here in front of us. So I was just caught a little off guard that this was coming to us tonight. So I'm just wondering if staff can speak to any kind of initial estimates, specifically, you know, if the first piece is that we're committing for an ongoing program. And then the second piece is to include it in our budget for this coming year. But we don't have any numbers in front of us, any kind of analysis. So I'm wondering if staff can speak to that. Obviously, we'll get the numbers when the budget is proposed, but yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any initial work that's been done so we know what kind of numbers we're thinking about for especially, you know, if we're saying that we're wanting this on an ongoing basis, it would be nice to know what we're talking about here.
Fantastic. I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvin.
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Feedback that we had received suggested having a conversation with the RCMP when these foot patrols were instituted following the, I would say, the open house related to the downtown business improvement area. It was, I would say it was unplanned, so it was a response to a situation, and the RCMP needs some time to implement these types of things if there is some consideration to go forward. It will be a matter that is considered during our financial plan. The initial estimate is between $50,000 and $60,000, I believe, for the service. And it has no financial implications there's no taxation implications and can be accommodated within our existing budget. Having said that, though, this is not intended to take away the ability to consider that during the financial plan, just in conversation with the acting detachment commander from an operational perspective. There needs to be some consideration, particularly since there is an ask for the April 1st timeline. And if I may carry on, my apologies, just ensuring that it would be operationalized is something we'd have to work at, but there was a need to have a timeline. So we'll work together should council give us this direction to start on the actual implementation date.
Perfect. That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to clarify, based on a comment of Councillor Jolicoeur's, the word ongoing. I'm reading that as ongoing from April 1st to Labor Day, not ongoing beyond this year. Are we clear that that's the intent? We're talking about a program for this upcoming summer, essentially. This doesn't bind us to doing this every year necessarily. Mr. Garvin.
Through the mayor to Councillor Hillian, the intention, because there's operational implications, is to consider if council wants to make this a regular part of our policing program, and we would discuss that during the financial planning process. But passing this motion doesn't commit you in it for eternity to fund this. But again, just getting some signaling, and if what we're hearing generally is it needs to be considered, and I think it's good for our RCMP partners to hear.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and I think, you know, really the feedback that we got from the community and maybe from the RCMP as well, just that it could potentially start a little bit earlier. And again, we're going to be having ongoing conversations with the RCMP. There's a new detachment commander that's been announced. And once he sort of gets his feet solidly underneath him, we'll be continuing these conversations. And so, you know, the potential to say, let's do this every year, that can certainly happen ongoing, but it's not bound in this particular motion. So looking out in Zoom land, I don't see any questions. So I just want to make sure you can hear us, and excellent. So with that, we do have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your presentation this evening, and I'm sure we'll be chatting soon.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, with that, we're going to go to corporate services 6.1.1 bylaw dispute adjudication system. And we'll pass it over to Mr. Garvin.
Through the mayor and council, Ms. O'Connell will give an overview of this report.
I'll turn your mic on.
Thanks very much. I'm very excited to bring the first bylaw adjudication report to council. It feels like we've been talking about this for a long time. So happy to see our new bylaw manager really getting things going quite quickly. So as council is aware, we've historically been under the MTI system, which is the Municipal Ticket Information System. It is a court-bound system. So it's the difference between MTI and adjudication system is MTI tickets need to be personally served, which cause issues for, as you can imagine, things like parking tickets or other tickets where we may not have the time or liberty to wait to meet the individual personally to provide them with their ticket gift. And with bylaw adjudication, essentially we can issue the tickets. It takes it out of the court process. Adjudicators are those who have been approved by the provincial government themselves. We can't use other adjudications adjudicators that aren't on that list. The adjudicators will go through the bylaw enforcement file, so look at photos, and basically determine whether or not the probability of the offense had taken place. Bylaw officers would support that process by providing the evidence. Individuals who want to dispute can also come and provide their evidence. However, before you get to the adjudication process, everyone's dispute will be considered by a screening officer. And the screening officers really are subject matter experts within those areas. So it could include somebody like the building manager. It could include a city planner around interpretation of tree bylaws. It could include our manager of bylaw services. It really depends on where the expertise lies to make the interpretation. And really in those situations, the screening officer are more considering the specifics of a case, like something that may have led to a bylaw infraction that was beyond someone's control. So in my experience working with a bylaw adjudication system in my past life at another city, this was often, parking tickets issued around hospital areas where people weren't able to leave the hospital to plug their meter because their appointments ran late. So there are definitely life circumstances that can be considered in the screening process, but the adjudicator is really a bit more, did the offense take place or did it not? One of the nice things about rolling out bylaw adjudication now, not only is it a stated council strategic priority, but we've also had the regional district move to adjudication and the town of Comox and Cumberland. Oh, sorry, town of Comox and village of Cumberland. And we've been talking to the CERD specifically to be able to share the adjudication resources. So we'll be able to split the costs between us. And depending on the volume of ticket disputes, we could be looking at a quarterly or biannually adjudication process. So essentially tonight, we're just seeking direction from council to begin drafting the bylaws required in order for the province to consider moving us into the adjudication system. And just as to be mindful, this does not eliminate the need for MTIs. There is the limit of only $500 fine tickets are the maximum that can be issued under adjudication. So we still, under the MTI, can do MTI tickets as well as long form is also an option. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for that verbal report and the additional staff report. I'm really proud of this. I spoke to this when it came to us first. I think this is something that we can showcase to the rest of the province. Really, our approach. Reading it a second time from the first time this came to council, you always catch new things, and I really appreciate under the highlights from the policy. The curiosity, engagement with curiosity, and you spoke around really the expertise across staffing around the unique perspectives depending on the infraction. But one of the things that I really appreciate is the commensurate intervention. Just as enforcement activities are to be proportional to the infraction, the process of disputing a bylaw ticket should also be commensurated to the severity of the infraction. And you used the example of someone parking near the hospital. I think that is really allows us to meet people where they're at and take into consideration their unique perspectives and of course the trauma-informed practice piece. So I'm just really happy to see this come forward. I only have two questions. One is under the screening officer section of the staff report. It speaks to the date of the adjudication, which can be conducted through MSM Teams and Zoom. And I just, from an equity lens, I'm just wondering if staff can speak to any ways that we can inadvertently or that we can support inadvertent impacts of having these types of processes through virtual means if individuals don't have access. I'm wondering, would we make a room available or a laptop available, things like that. I'm wondering if staff can speak to ensuring that we have that accessibility lens to this.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Jolicoeur. This is one of those pieces where in the event that an individual isn't able to participate virtually, they of course can come in person. It's the adjudicators themselves that are virtual. And then disputants can either participate virtually as well, or they can participate through a medium here at the regional district in order to dispute that ticket with the adjudicator.
Great, thanks. And my other question, it was just around, and you spoke briefly around the cost savings and going in on this process with Cumberland and Courtenay. I'm just wondering if you can, and it's kind of highlighted briefly in the staff report, but if you can explain what that would look like in practice in terms of the adjudicator and the day, what that day would look like.
Sure. So really the cost will be distributed on adjudication day based on the proportion of the tickets that are being brought forward for dispute from each of the municipalities themselves. So in the event Courtney represents 80% of the tickets, we would be responsible for 80% of the adjudicator costs for that day.
All right, thanks for the questions. And Councillor Frisch. Oh, Councillor Hillion's light went on. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks very much. I had a question about whether someone who's issued a ticket has the option to go down that particular pathway of the bylaw dispute adjudication system or change the municipal ticket. No, it's like
So it's
whichever.
one or the other. So it's a different ticket that's issued in the event of an adjudication ticket. It's not the same form of ticket as an MTI.
Sure. And so the question has come up about, you know, fairness and a process. If someone's given a ticket, and I guess it's stated on the provincial website that there's a lower burden of proof for the bylaw dispute adjudication system. What are our thoughts on that?
Because of the type of infractions that would be routed through the bylaw adjudication process versus something like the MTI. Speaking to what Councillor Jolicoeur highlighted around the commensurate response, you won't have things that are overly complex being sent to bylaw adjudication. Really, we're looking at things like minor tree bylaw violations, parking violations, things more along those lines, potentially like noise, off-leash dogs, that type of thing. Anything that's more substantial that would warrant that level of investigation process or that meet that burden of proof, those are really the ones that will remain in the MTI or long form court process, because typically those are ones that are very expensive infractions in the case where they need thousands of dollars per occurrence. So really proving whether or not someone was parked illegally. My officers have been trained in appropriate investigation practices, including documentation, and I have no concern that they'll be able to meet that burden of proof when it comes. And if there's any questions, we can always deal with it at the screening officer period of time as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the work involved in this. I had a conversation with one of our intrepid newspaper reporters the other day. I don't know if he's been in touch with your city staff yet, but one of the concerns that was raised was with a more streamlined and therefore easier process of dealing with tickets. And these are my words, would our bylaw officers become a little more trigger happy in terms of throwing out tickets when they really don't have to worry about ever having to prove it in court? And we've got an administrative system that determines whether the person is going to be held accountable or not.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hillian. That would be completely contradictory to the policy that Council has just adopted. Essentially, the policy very clearly outlines that our pyramid of enforcement, when we get to the point of ticketing, it really is towards those individuals who have knowingly violated a bylaw and have disregarded the existence of the bylaw. So it's very intentional when you get to that point. And or the damage is so significant, potentially examples could be around environmental hazards and things like that, that you just can't simply ignore the impact. And therefore there's a violation impact through an enforcement. But no, the officers would not become ticket happy. Otherwise, in doing so, they would be in contradiction of the bylaw policy that's been adopted and all of the approaches therein, and that would become a performance management issue.
Thanks for that. I also pointed out that if we were issuing substantially more tickets than normally and without the due discretion that is involved in determining whether to do it or not, we would potentially be creating additional work for ourselves through the screening officers and the adjudication process, which isn't something that we're particularly looking to do. So in my view, this is actually more convenient for ordinary people who may want to dispute a ticket. They get to sit down in an office or engage over the Zoom with somebody who lives in the community rather than waiting for a court process like I did when I disputed my parking ticket in Victoria. And on the steps of the courthouse, lose heart and decide, oh, well, I may as well pay it after all. So we're actually giving people a break and streamlining the city's processes at the same time. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. And just keeping things out of the court system, not only do our staff save the time from going to that system, but really because it's our staff's job to proceed through court processes, they are obligated to attend those court dates. Whereas residents who've been issued a ticket who have to attend a court date, they're leaving their jobs potentially during the daytime or having to find childcare or transportation. There are a lot of other things that are impacting them and being able to participate in something like that. So with the city being able to attend and others having challenges attending, really the moving to the adjudication system is a much more equitable system overall and is a win-win for both us and individuals we've issued tickets to.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Elaine and Councillor Frisch.
Well, thanks, Mayor. I was actually just going to move the recommendation, if you're comfortable with that. Move that council direct staff to proceed with the preparation of all bylaws, policies, procedures, and agreements necessary to create a bylaw adjudication program, and that staff be authorized to work with the province of BC as needed to gain provincial approval for the City of Courtenay to use the bylaw adjudication system as outlined in the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act.
It's been moved and seconded. We've had a pretty good discussion. I don't see any further questions or comments at this point. I'll just again give a big thanks to staff. I know I spoke to Kate about this years ago, and it was so exciting. And we had pandemics and other things to deal with, I suppose. But it's really, really great to see this coming forward as we modernize bylaw in general. So thanks so much. With that, all in favor? And that's unanimous. And we'll move on to item 6.2.1, and there is a presentation.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I believe Mr. Preston, our manager of building services, is going to walk us through this components of the staff report and be available for questions.
Did you want to make a comment, Ms. Wade, or?
Through your worship, I'll just follow up on what the city manager has said, that Mr. Preston is going to make a presentation on the report that is before you on the zero carbon step code, and that staff is available to answer any questions after the completion of the presentation. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. So zero carbon step code implementation. So just a overview of the presentation. We'll look at the council motion, some of the background with respect to the zero carbon step code, discussion and the rationale at achieving the recommendation that's presented to council tonight. So
outside voice, just a little louder.
Okay.
Or sometimes you just get closer to the microphone. That might help as well.
Too much paperwork. So on 25th of October of last year, and the following motion was put forward to staff to review implementation options for the zero carbon step code. So that recommendation was obviously based on OCP policies and directions. So particularly in policy BL6 to regulate carbon pollution for new buildings as soon as possible and no later than 2030. It also referenced policy BL7, which is basically supporting the first policy statement, but also reviewing our building and permitting policies. One policy I've also included here was BL4, which was the acceleration of the adoption of the BC Energy Step Code to stay one step higher than the minimum standards. So on May the 1st, 2023, the province actually updated the BC Building Code. And what that did was it introduced the energy step code, so requiring buildings to be 20% more energy efficient. But it also introduced the zero carbon step code, basically the metrics that local governments can apply, and a pathway forward to zero carbon. So during the first, we introduced the building bylaw 3114 that came into effect. So we addressed our policy direction in BL4, and we are now one step higher than the BC Building Code. And one thing that I think tends to get overlooked a little bit with the energy step code and the zero carbon step code is one does actually influence the other. So as you improve energy efficiency, you would actually decrease your GHG emissions because you're not using as much energy to heat a building per se. So at the moment, Courtney's now at step 4 for part 9 buildings and step 3 for part 3 buildings, which is basically, you know, a 40% increase over base values of the prescriptive requirements of the code. So with the introduction of that, local governments now have the option to regulate carbon requirements. So the metrics that's been established in the code, there are 4 levels. So the EL refers to emission levels. So you go from EL1 and progress up in an incremental process to EL4, which is full decarbonisation of buildings. EL1 is just a monitoring process, so it has no metrics. It just assesses where the building is at this time. So it has no impact unless somebody chooses to do so. So as we looked at it, the Clean BC roadmap has a pathway to 2030, which actually also follows our policy statement in BL6 for achieving that as well. So from the Clean BC roadmap, they established incremental steps for implementing carbon reduction. So they were looking in 2024 to introduce medium, 2027, and then obviously 2030 to go to zero carbon. So it sort of relates, the incremental steps within the BC code also aligns with the BC roadmap as well. So as you can see just through this slide, how EL2 has a medium reduction in 2024, which is this year, and then progresses EL3, then EL4 up into 2030. So staff had looked at this. So we are considering harmonizing with the Clean BC roadmap because there's a strategy already in place. It aligned with BL6 and BL7, which is the policy directions in the OCP. Now, there was no time limits with respect to the zero carbon step code implemented in the building code. So, but as you could see from the previous slide, it certainly relates to an incremental increase. And with the BC Clean roadmap, it established a timeline for that. Now, other local governments, we looked at how they had moved forward with respect to the implementation of the zero carbon step code. And particularly we looked at Nanaimo, Victoria and Saanich, particularly Victoria. That was the first local government that actually took the initiative to move forward on this. So they went through a very significant engagement process with the development industry and also community. And they also had delegated staff to work on this plan. And so, they didn't, and this process would probably take, it was around about 6 months to initiate this. So if you were considering sort of establishing more of an accelerated plan than how the Clean BC plan is looking, that certainly is achievable. But as I said earlier, the city of Nanaimo, Victoria, and how they did it, they did a lot of engagement with the industry first, where at this stage we've not had any direct engagement. with respect to the energy, the zero carbon step code. We did have one meeting of last year in July, and the response from the development industry at that time, it was they were pretty vague on their knowledge around this. So it would certainly require a significant engagement process if we were going to accelerate to any extent. And this is where you get the leapfrog approach that sort of Victoria and Nanaimo has taken, where they've gone from EL1 and they just jumped to EL4. So it is a consideration, but I believe that a certain amount of engagement will need to be done if we are going to pursue that. We would also ask the consideration, for staff and the work plan with respect to the department's available, potential of doing this work. We also would have to put into some budget consultation with respect to this. Just respect to the how much cost it would actually do to do the engagement and the timelines. So that would need to be considered if we were going to move forward with accelerating the energy or the zero carbon step code. So our rationale for coming up with the recommendation, which is basically on the last slide here, is the current BC building code doesn't have any EL, there's no EL requirements that you have to meet. It's all driven by council's direction and what they choose to adopt. So there is no timelines actually within the building code at this time. So how staff have looked at it is that to be you can be one step higher than the BC building code if you follow the Green BC or the Clean BC plan, because at the moment there are no requirements. So EL1 is just measure only. So it has no impact on reducing GHGs. So to reduce GHGs, you would have to go to EL2. So in essence, you would actually be one step higher than the BC building code, which sort of falls back to the direction that council took with the approach with the energy step code, which was that policy in BL4 staying one step ahead. So the rationale of following the Clean BC plan actually also supplements the being one step higher than the BC building code at this time. We also look at the engagement with the development industry would be more of an inform and educate. So if we're looking at implementing EL4 EL2 this year, we would have a time period in which to educate and inform the industry, and it wouldn't be as much of an impact as going right to zero carbon EL4. So that is part of our rationale on how we're looking at that. It also provides time for industry to adapt and prepare for these changes. City of Nanaimo adopted EL1, and then it's a 6-month window before they actually even move forward. So there's still no impact on their GHG reductions at this time, even though they're leapfrogging higher than that. It also allows us to get some understanding of the current BC Hydro service capacity. That's something that would have to investigate and communicate with BC Hydro to see where they are. If you're moving to the higher emission reduction standards you're requiring, you're using more electrification of the building. For small single family dwellings, the impact would be probably quite negligible, but if you put a multi-story building up with apartments, you could be looking at a service upgrade, and that would be a significant cost and also timelines associated with development. So, there's obviously a significant drive for units and building more accommodation. So it's something for consideration. So to give us the opportunity to look at that as well. It'll also give us the opportunity if council wanted to accelerate beyond the BC Clean Plan, or what's being proposed. And we can look at looking into that and investigating that more in 2025. So it gives us, so what it does is allows some reduction in the GHGs meeting council's direction. But if we want to accelerate the plan, we can also look at that moving into next year. So that was the rationale that we are looking at the resolution that we have made, and it stopped. I can't get you next slide. Oh, there we go. So, so if you council got any questions, then I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Excellent. There is a hand up, Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm not sure how well you can hear with the ferry noise, but just want to say thank you to staff, particularly I know the planning has had a lot on their plate over the last little while and are continuing to with the various legislative changes that have happened. So really appreciate you being able to bring this forward. And I can certainly see the reason why this present moment is probably not a time where this kind of work could be undertaken. But what I did want to think about a bit is, currently the resolution's up on the screen, talks about increases to EL3 in 3 years from now and EL4 6 years from now. And I'm thinking maybe there's a middle ground between, obviously it can't be, that work just can't be done right now because of staff capacity, but perhaps we can advance the timeline from 2027 to 2030. And I think the last bullet, perhaps on the previous slide, was talking about the work being possibly done in 2025. And I guess I just wanted to, I think our OCP is pretty clear that this, we committed under BL6 that we were going to advocate for this, which we did. And I know I personally spent many dozens of hours working through Help Cities Lead on advocating for cities to have this kind of authority. And it also talks about us acting quickly to make use of that. And I certainly understand the current heavy workload of the planning department. Had an opportunity to speak to some of the Nanaimo staff actually, and they said that Victoria did 3 engagement sessions with developers. Building on that, Nanaimo did a single session with developers, and they said it took about 2 months of staff time and I believe $33,000. So those were the time and the staffing and funds involved in that. And I just wanted to get perhaps Marianne's sense of whether doing the work not in 2027 and 2030, whether sort of the 2025 timeline or even Q4 of 2024, whether that's a prospect that makes sense to her, just in deference to the heavy workload that she and her department have been handling recently. So just to ask about the workability of that timeline that was on the previous slide of looking at EL3 and EL4 within a year.
Ms. Wade.
Through your worship to Councillor Cole Hamilton, thank you for that question. And thank you for also acknowledging the amount of work that the department has before it over the next 6 months. I wanted to just address the rationale for presenting what we did with our recommendation was to align with Clean BC and our OCP and council strategic priorities. And that would get the process into play. And then we could reevaluate by doing a more engagement process in 2025 to look at the acceleration to for the dates for E3 and E4 and bring back a recommendation to council in 2025 after consulting with the industry on this. I am aware of what Saanich in Victoria and the city of Nanaimo has undertaken, and I have talked with staff there as well. And it was a 6 months process, and they had a bit of an advantage from the fact that the RDN and the CRD were leading the charge with a full department with climate action staff that could help to facilitate, to augment a lot of the costs in regards to engagement, modeling, and helping with report writing. So they benefited greatly from that. We're not quite in that position. So we would have to come up with an engagement strategy. I do know from the city of Nanaimo and talking with their planner that I know they had the 33,000, and then top of that, the RDN put in 18,000, and plus they had a staff that was dedicated for a third of the time for over 4 to 6 months, and then manager staff. So looking at that, that's roughly a 50,000 plus staff time. And so, we could look at that and propose something, for the 2025 budget year, and have a proper communication and strategy plan. And then have that discussion about acceleration in 2025. So did that answer your questions?
That did. I might have a follow-up, but I know there are other people who have in line, but I really appreciate the clarity, Marion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. I hope I'm coming in okay here. Yeah, thanks for this report and just the thoroughness provided of the rationale for the recommendation. I also want to acknowledge that our development services department is just incredibly burdened by legislation coming down from the province. And from my perspective as a council member, we wanted to jump on the opportunity to address building carbon emissions as soon as possible, which is also, the wording referenced in the OCP, but as soon as possible in this case, I don't think is immediately, just given our limited capacity to do the work. I mean, there's no change in policy that's possible without a burden on our city staff. And of course, there's a cost involved in doing engagement. So I think that's my starting point. I am not certain I see a good rationale for embarking on a process that would start just one step ahead with the EAL2. And part of my thinking on that is that I'm not clear that that step really would lead to a reduction in GHG emissions, but it would create, it would demand some staff resources in order to do that. But it's not clear to me that that would actually move our emissions down. And I would prefer to really have an understanding of how that would really help meet the targets that we set out in our OCP. And then the other comment I wanted to make was that I understand why the Clean BC has laid out this plan in this way, and the plan is addressing every jurisdiction in BC, and including the north, including rural communities. And I would argue that the city of Courtenay is not in that position. We're in a much better position to transition to heating sources that are lower emission, in other words, electricity. And then the other point I want to make is the other jurisdictions that have done this work that we can build on, none of them opted for anything other than EL1 to EL4, as far as I could understand from the report. So even looking at building on that work of other communities, I don't see, I didn't see anyone leaning towards doing it differently than either going with the Clean BC plan or accelerating kind of right to the highest step. So I think maybe what I would like to see is just us look at this again, maybe in the fall, Q4 of 2024, and get some information on what the actual cost of proceeding with this would be. If we can start that engagement process either later this year or in 2025, I would leave that up to staff. But I don't know that I would want to expend much staff resources unless we're really looking to take on the more proactive approach with the EL4, at least EL3 to EL4. Yeah, just given my earlier comments. So I don't really have a question. I just wanted to provide my thinking on this. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And we do have some more speakers, so we'll go to Councillor Hillian.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and that's the motion that's on the screen right now for those who would like to read it. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm not surprised, just kind of playing off of Councillor McCollum and Councillor Cole Hamilton's comments. I'm not really supportive of the second and that statement, the timeline specifically for me. I won't repeat the statements other than to say I agree with Councillor McCollum in terms of the assessment of the actual impacts of EL2 specifically and EL3. And so I am supportive of moving us along the timeline faster. The Clean BC plan I see as a bare minimum for the province in meeting our provincial obligations in addressing climate change. The city of Courtenay has been quite progressive and has been a climate leader at a municipal level, and I see us taking that stand when it comes to the zero carbon step code and actually advancing to something that is a little bit more impactful on our carbon emissions. And so I guess the other piece that I have more curiosity, and I did speak to staff a little bit about this, but given that the Clean BC plan has been out for a few years now, and I understand that staff met with the industry in the summer of 2023, I think, or last year. You know, the last statement there speaks about developing a community engagement plan and spending time with industry to support them in understanding what they need to do to meet these requirements through Clean BC. I guess I'm curious if staff can speak to the requirements of the industry or any industry body to be educating their members or standards for their members to actually meet the obligations under Clean BC. I'm just a little, this is, for me, seems like we're doing work that might be done through either the province or through industry experts. So I'm wondering if staff can speak to the rationale around the community engagement and the industry engagement piece.
Ms. Ward? Wait, sorry.
Through your worship to Councillor Jolicoeur. Yes, in regards to changes like this, similar to the Energy Step Code, there was engagements with municipalities and the Building Association to inform and educate about what the timelines are going to be for the Step Code. So similar thought process here, even though this hasn't been laid out in the regulations the way it was with the Energy Step Code. The idea is to inform and educate, which is what our colleagues did in the CRD and the RDN, like the city of Victoria, Saanich, and Nanaimo, is to actually educate and share the information. We do not have a local building association here or UDI, those sorts of things. Victoria does. This is about building relationships within the community, exchanging information so that as we progress through the strategic priorities of council, that we can educate, inform, gather information, and talk about how this is going to roll out. And also then if we move forward in 2025, we can talk about the acceleration process. So this is the groundwork for informing and educating about this and how it works with the Energy Step Code and Council's strategic priorities and our goals in the OCP.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand some of the local context of what our industry partners are looking for in us as a partner. Yeah, I guess I will just say that, I mean, I'm happy to offer an amendment to the motion that really it's after 2024 and that second clause there. I would just strike the rest of that out and some sort of language and staff come back in with a report on in 2025 to advance the timeline. I'm not sure if those who moved this motion, if they're open to that, or if others have any thoughts, but I think everything else I'm okay with, but it's the explicit timeline for EL3 in 2027 and EL4 in 2030 that I'm not supportive of. So I'll leave it to others to comment.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur, and I see Councillor Cole Hamilton has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. And I wanted to support the proposed amendment by Councillor Jolicoeur. As I've acknowledged, I fully understand this is not something we can do right away, but deferring any significant movement to 3 and then 6 years into the future seems to be extending the timeline longer than is necessary, and it seems to me to be very challenging for us to meet our, the goals that we set in our OCP in terms of GHG reductions if we're extending these quite as far as we are into the future. So I would, I'd support and second the amendment by Councillor Jolicoeur.
All right, and I see Councillor McCollum has her hand up as well, and our clerk has been writing things down as well, so I'm not sure, but maybe I'll pass it over to Councillor McCollum first.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I know that the amendment hasn't been moved yet, and I just wanted clarity. I believe there was a reference to removing the text after 2024. But I would want the EL2 reference removed as well, because I'm not supportive of putting staff time into to communicating that step with the development industry. It's I'm not convinced that there's value in adopting policy that aims for medium carbon emissions in this day and age. So I'm in favor of amending this to maybe broaden it to just allow a report to come back on an implementation plan in 2025, preferably early in 2025, but I don't want the EL2 reference in it, nor the timelines of 2027 or 2030. I prefer that it's less prescriptive if we can't move ahead with the process in this work plan, in our current work plan. Thanks.
Okay, so we have not necessarily dueling potential amendments, but certainly some different thoughts. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I wonder if staff can comment on the effectiveness of moving to EL2, earlier. And speaking to what Councillor McCollum is suggesting, that maybe it's not, doesn't gain us any benefit from emissions. And if they're sensing that there's any workable solution to speeding things up based on work plan. I know you spent a lot of time already putting this together, but does staff have any comments on those two ideas?
I'll pass it over to Ms. Wade.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Council. Just a couple of thoughts. The reason why, the rationale that we put this forward is to follow how this energy step code rolled out, which was that it did it over time, and it was a way of signaling to the industry the intent to move into the zero carbon step code and the emissions, and that was the intent of where we wanted to go with energy efficiency, carbon emissions, and building performance. So following that philosophy, the idea is that with this in place, it signals that council is moving towards the zero carbon code, the zero carbon step code. And the intent is to bring it on in line with the Clean BC. And then from there, what staff will do is then go into the industry and come back with a recommendation about acceleration, very similar to what the city of Nanaimo did. As they went out into the industry, they had a certain energy level they were going to look at in step code. They did it in combination. We're already way ahead with the step code, so like we're leading the charge on that one. And then what they did is they adjusted the energy level emissions over time with their time frame as they consulted and engaged. So the idea would be we go in 2025 with talking about how if we move up EL3 to an earlier year, say 2026, and then move up EL4, earlier, then we could come back and make that amendment to council and bring that in. So it's kind of like a two-phased approach, but at least with this recommendation, we're starting the process.
And then it sounds like you're leaving a bit of room for what would effectively be unknowns for the industry to keep up. Okay. Based on that, I'm actually pretty confident that we should maybe stick with the recommendation, but I'll leave it to the wisdom of council to speak from here. Thanks.
Right, Councillor Schulker.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for that context that we're leading the charge on the energy code, because I think that means that we can lead the charge with the zero carbon step code. Just a point of clarification, just going off of Councillor McCollum's question on, and I'm open to that, probably not wanting to invest too much of staff time to educate the industry around EL2. But from reading on page 1 of the staff report, reading what EL2 is, and in that last paragraph that speaks to after 2023, all new space and water heating equipment sold and installed in BC will be at least 100% efficient. So are we not already, is the provincial standard already not at EL2? Because EL2 speaks to heating and hot water.
Through the mayor to Councillor Jolly here. You're talking about equipment as opposed to GHGs being emitted.
Okay.
So it's the energy efficiency of the equipment, not the
Building envelope, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the emissions that are generated from the building. So just to also answer a little from Councillor Frisch's question, does it have an impact, EL2? There's GHG intensity requirements and gas emissions levels that have to be achieved either by your hot water heating system or your heating system itself. So you've got either or. So just referencing in the staff report, it's your space heating or your domestic, but the metrics within the code of EL2 will make an impact because you've got to meet those requirements. What the EL2 does, it gives you that option of you can either use your space heating or your water heating. Now moving to EL3, you don't get the choice, but the metrics are going higher. So you have to meet, or the emissions is going down. So it gets more restrictive the higher the number you get. So when you get to EL3, you have to meet those requirements by both heating and water. And then when you go to EL4, it's also taking into your cooking facilities. So throw away your gas oven is almost where you're getting. So it's quite restricted when you get to EL4. It's taking those things into consideration.
And then just a second point of clarification for staff. If we were to go off Councillor McCollum's comments, not in fact do anything in 2024, then there would be nothing to amend in the bylaw. Is that correct? In which case that entire clause would not be necessary and we just look to have a staff report in early 2025 and maybe free up some of your time to do all the other work.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I don't usually speak about procedural items, so we have a motion on the floor. If council wants to provide an entirely, we have the existing motion or recommendation. If the recommendation is simply to come back with an approach to deliver and consider the implementation of the zero carbon step code and engage with the development community beginning in 2025, then I believe you would defeat the motion and then make that motion. And I think from a staff capacity perspective, the world will have hopefully calmed down in 2025 with all of this provincial legislation. So I just offer that as a commentary.
All right, thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor, and thanks for those comments, Jeff. Yeah, just rereading this, I mean, really the motion is to move in accordance with the timelines established with Clean BC Roadmap, which is not the timelines that I would like to move on. And then the direction is simply to engage in order to inform the development industry and community on the zero carbon step code and its mandates. And I would like our engagement with the development industry to be more focused around moving further up, moving that timeline more quickly and looking at BL4 specifically. From what I heard from speaking with Nanaimo staff, that the development industry was not nearly as resistant to BL4 as the energy step code, just because there's a lot fewer cost implications for development and not including a type of energy as opposed to having to build to a higher standard. So I think that engagement piece would be really important, and we don't want to miss that opportunity by simply informing what the zero carbon step code means. So just based on those two things, I am going to vote against this motion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. I don't see, oh, Councillor Hillian.
Just on a point of order, Mr. Mayor, there's no amendment on the floor, correct?
There is no amendment. I think the clerk was just trying to capture what was being said in case there was going to be an amendment, but then there was multiple amendments. But at this point, there's no official amendment on the floor. Yep. I don't see any further questions or comments, so I'll call the question on the recommendation as presented in our agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
And we have, yeah, so I'm the tiebreaker. I'm going to vote, I've been listening to the conversation quite intently here this evening, and I think that one of the, I know this is a recommendation from, yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. I'm going to vote in favor of the motion that's on the floor. All right. And so I believe that makes it pass. All right. Normally we take a dinner break at about 6:30. We are nearing 7 o'clock now. So my recommendation is that either we take a break now or potentially one more item. Look to council for any thoughts on that. But given the time, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just think that there's probably a fair bit of people in the audience here who are waiting for likely item 10.2.1. And so looking for seconder to amend the agenda to move up 10.2.1 to now.
It's been seconded. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, hi. Oh, okay, I'm not muted. Apologies. I just wanted to let council know that we're needing to reposition ourselves to continue to participate in this meeting. So I will have to leave the call for probably 10 minutes while I find a new place to connect. So it would be on my end a good time to recess. Either way, I'll have to disconnect for a few. My apologies. And likewise for Councillor Cole Hamilton, he's in transit with me.
Okay. All right. No, I appreciate that. Take that into consideration. I think we'll take our recess now and we'll reconvene. We'll kind of book that for about 7:15. Does it? Yeah.
Are we still going to do that?
Do we?
Oh,
Right. They're gone. Sorry, my apologies. I'm feeling a bit discombobulated, but okay, everybody. So we're gonna just take a bit of a break and then we're gonna come back momentarily.
Do you want to go on to consider the?
Yeah, we can still, I'll just get council's attention again. Sorry, Councillor Frisch, Councillor Moran. Councillor Frisch, my apologies. I know we're, yeah, we were gonna recess. We do have a motion on the floor that's been moved and seconded though, so we have to dispense of that. So, but we do have quorum. So though all those in favor of, yeah, you can speak to it. Yeah. Okay, so no, you can't. Sorry, my apologies. I feel mean to say that. But all those in favor of varying the agenda so that when we return after our break, we'll be doing the motion that Councillor Jolicoeur. So when we return from our break. All those in favor? Any opposed? And so we're gonna vary the agenda after we get back. My apologies. We are now recessed. And we'll come back as quick as possible.
This room has no walls.
All right, we're just gonna ask people to take their seats and we're gonna get going here. All right, just to refresh everybody, we're going to be going to item 10.2. We voted on that right before the break. And we have the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw 3121 for third reading. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm not sure how we want to proceed here, but I do have a couple of questions that I wanted to pose to staff if that's an appropriate place to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was a bit curious because we got a letter from the BC Civil Liberties Association suggesting that our bylaw was out of line with case law. And they quoted Shantz, which came out of Abbotsford some years ago. I thought that there was a more recent decision out of the Victoria Supreme Court, but I did want to clarify with staff just where we stand with the legal advice that we have received and how that correspondence that was sent to us, to what extent we agree or disagree with that.
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hillian. For a more in-depth response, I'd say we'd be looking at getting a more fulsome legal opinion. But in any of the court cases, whether it's Shantz or any of the other that we reference within the process, there are always items that are recorded in the court proceedings that include what were things that came up during the deliberation. What actually results of coming out through the judge's orders can be a different thing. So The case law that I looked at when we went through this process was looking at the actual judge's orders rather than looking at the points of deliberation within it. But again, it would have to be something that would need to be looked at by legal to make sure that that is the distinction between the interpretation or how staff and legal have looked at it in the creation of the bylaw versus what is being kind of disputed through the letter.
Thanks for that. The other question I had was whether staff had any comment on the specific amendments that were proposed in Ms. Forgren's presentation tonight, which we also received in writing a few days ago. I think there were a number of specific amendments taking the word offensive out, a number of things like that. I wonder if staff has had a chance to digest any of that, or if we would be better served by asking for an additional staff report and putting this off to another day.
All right, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hillian. I have had a chance to take a look and have some initial responses back. At the same time, because of the amount of energy and effort that went into the report that was submitted, I think it definitely would warrant a more formal response back in the form of a report. At the same time, if there are specific amendments that you're curious about, I'm happy to provide the kind of surface level response that I have in front of me.
Yeah, I think I would prefer that that we give you the time to respond to this in a more fulsome manner, and I think it would give us the opportunity to fully digest and reflect on it. I think you know, there's been a tremendous amount of work done by staff, but clearly we've had a significant response from the community, and you know, we want to make sure that that what we do is measured and appropriate, and I, for one, don't want to be perceived as acting against the human rights of vulnerable individuals in the community. I mean, I don't think that the bylaw necessarily does that as it stands, but if there's ways that we can make it more effective to signal that to the community, then you know, I'd support that as well. So I don't know if a motion to defer is in order, but maybe since I've already spoken, I'll leave that to somebody else. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Councillor Hillian, and City Manager, Mr. Garvin.
And through the mayor, thank you, Councillor Hillian. Would say significant review has been part of the drafting process. However, I think it would be extremely important for council to signal what components you would like reviewed for a number of reasons, including this bylaw affects the entire community, and if we are going to be asked to look at certain components, then if it's clear what components are going to be looked at, then other components of the community would know that. We'd be really concerned that this doesn't turn into a back and forth with different perspectives on this bylaw, because we have a very well organized and well informed group that has provided us specific feedback on the bylaw. However, if the entirety of the bylaw is still to be reviewed, then other people may have some perspectives as well, and they haven't weighed in on areas that they support or don't support. So I would really ask that we have specific direction, and that will make it much more effective, because I think there's areas of agreement, and our delegation today spoke to some good components, not specifics, but general good components to the bylaw. And we do know that there are other matters, other important matters that are being regulated by this Parks and Open Space bylaw.
All right, thanks for that. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. Took a little while there. Yeah, I support Councillor Hillian's initial comments, and nice to hear from staff that there's a desire to have a formal response to the quite a large package here of correspondence we've received from numerous community groups and individuals who are impacted by this bylaw disproportionately as a result of their lived and living experience. And I know that staff and the consultant did a really good job at trying to really find balance here between those. A lot of the staff reports speak to an analysis that was done. And so to staff's question around some specifics, I do have some specifics as a result of some of the correspondence we've received, both from the BCCLA, but also from community members. And I think in the March 22nd, 2023 report and the September 27th report where the guidance policy was presented. There was reference to numerous case law that was used in the analysis. And I'm curious now that we've had some legal experts in the field of sheltering and unhoused populations and human rights share their concerns. I'm wondering if in that process of doing the case law analysis, if there is any kind of documentation that would be available for council to review. In the correspondences we have received, there has been some analysis from those with concerns. And so I'm wondering if that's something that can be provided to council.
Mr. Connell.
Thank you, Councillor Jolicoeur. The analysis that you're speaking about, if you're thinking there's a legal brief, there isn't. We basically go through the case law to see what the judge's orders are. And we ensure that the bylaw aligns with the judge's orders. So each one of the pieces of case law that comes out builds upon the other one. So you follow the chain of events and you see things evolve over time. And really, even though we're looking at a case law history of over the last 15 years or so, the most recent ones are a culmination of all of the previous ones leading up to that with additions over time. So in doing that, we don't need to go into the in-depth analysis. The analysis between how we look at case law, which is the judge's orders, versus potentially how organizations may look at the deliberations that were contemplated as part of what may have formed portions of the order at the end of the day, are two very different things. And whereas the city is looking at the actual case law outcome as opposed to the consideration to deliberations within that. And the criteria for the bylaw itself was to bring it into compliance with the case law. So if the case law changes, the bylaw will naturally, ideally change with it.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess it's hard to sift through all the legal language when we received a kind of a counter argument from legal experts as well. So I appreciate you highlighting kind of our approach to analysis. I will share the floor, but I do have one more question as it relates to some of the recommendations that were provided by a letter that we received from a group of service providers and workers in the community. And it was referred to in the letter from the Coalition to End Homelessness, which spoke to the importance of engagement and taking a pause to do more engagement. And I do appreciate the potential draft motion for council's consideration that staff provided, I think yesterday, that really speaks to providing some clarity around some policy positions. And one of the things that's not explicitly in there that I'm curious if staff can speak to, because it was referred to by the community, BCCLA and the coalition, which was the engagement with Indigenous communities. And I do believe that in one of the or two of the staff reports over the last year on this, in the policy section, it referred to our strategic priority around social equity lens and reconciliation. And so it is something that we prioritize as an organization. And so I'm just wondering if staff can speak to any engagement with Indigenous partners, Indigenous people specifically, and if there's also some room there for us to do further engagement.
Thank you, Councillor Jolicoeur. At the time that the policy document and the engagement was taking place, there was some challenges in some turnover that was taking place at Comox First Nation. So the individual that we reached out to, who we attempted to contact multiple times, did not respond when they were asked to engage. This was at a time when there was no intergovernmental officer, there was no executive director. So we went to the head of the Guardians. And unfortunately, repeated phone calls to set up the engagement sessions were not necessarily returned. So those were the attempts that were made, and unfortunately, there was no response from the staff member at the time.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful information to know, because as we heard, there's a disproportionate impact on Indigenous people, bylaws and laws in general, but also from our street population. So that's helpful to know that there's room for us to have those rights holders' voices involved in this process. And I'll cede the floor to others for comments. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. Councillor McCollum, I did see your hand up, but I'm just confirming if you're okay now or if you still had a question or comment.
I I think I might be having connection issues. Maybe I'll get into the back of the line, just so
Okay.
I'm not having trouble.
You are the back of the line at this point, so, but if you want to
Okay.
attempt, and if we have challenges, I have seen you come and go as well, so, we'll just see how far we can get.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my Zoom session just reloaded, but I seem to be getting you clearly now, so thank you. Yeah, I had a question on one of the issues that, or the requested changes that was raised in the delegation today, specifically around the request to remove the language around cannabis and other smoking, like the prohibition and possibly create areas where smoking is allowed in parks. I do see a real challenge with that one, in that we would still be trying to enforce people moving to a specific area. So, and then designating for smoking areas in all our parks. It seems maybe on a practical level, a difficult way to find a compromise. To me, it might be all or nothing, but I do remember, and this is the part that I'd like staff to clarify, that when we looked at our policy that's informing this bylaw, that there was a recognition that this aspect of the bylaw is not meant to be enforced against those who are needing to be in parks as they don't have another place that they can go. And if staff can just answer that, so I understand what that would look like in implementing the bylaw.
Okay, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCollum. That is correct, based on the bylaw policy that was adopted by council last year. In the event of an individual who is unhoused or struggling with mental health or addiction issues was found to be smoking cigarettes, cannabis, or vaping, really it would just be a matter of having a conversation about where are appropriate things to do so, and or just making sure they have a safe place to dispose of those things. But we haven't issued tickets to an unhoused individual in the 3.5 years I've been here, and we're not about to start. So,
okay, that's reassuring to hear. And I guess that kind of maybe leads into another thought that I've had in considering this whole process and of the feedback that we've heard from various groups and individuals in our community, and that this bylaw is being looked at and seen as a communication tool in how the public understands use of parks and open spaces, of course. And it's my understanding that really it's not the bylaw that's the communication piece, it's our communications. And that it's clear that we need to do a lot of communications on a change, and that process is just beginning. And maybe staff can speak to, again, some of the points that have been raised, and more importantly, concerns around how this will impact the most vulnerable people in our community, and whether those protections really come through policy and our community's understanding and in accommodating those folks, or if really that communication piece needs to come through the wording in this bylaw.
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCollum. That it's a challenging question in the sense that the regulatory tools we have in place that all interplay when it comes to bylaw enforcement include everything from our collective agreement with how we manage staff and things like our respectful workplace policy, to the parks, the bylaw compliance policy, to the bylaw compliance strategy as to how we're going to achieve the changes, to the individual bylaws themselves, as well as all the training and standard operating procedures that we're both going through and implementing and constantly evolving. So I believe that the tools we put forward would the intent is to see that equitable treatment and to embody the vision that's contained within the policy, which includes things around coming from a place of curiosity, looking at things like restorative justice as options, looking at trauma and culture informed practice. And the strategy speaks to how we have learning to do in that area and builds the plan over the next 3 years in order to make sure that we're doing that properly, because it's not work that necessarily pre-exists that we can copy and paste into our circumstance. And at the same time, like, I'm a bureaucrat, and these are things that I've been deeply involved in for the last year, and it's complex. So when we talk about how we're going to be communicating, in 2024, we have things like the Good Neighbor Guides that are going to be coming out. When we did the engagement, we asked how people wanted to find out about the regulations, to know where people can and can't shelter and the different regulations. And it was really around in-person engagement. So once things were complete, going through and having conversations to make things easier, as well as creating the Good Neighbor Guides. So the Good Neighbor Guides being pamphlets or brochures that explain in very plain language the very few types of bylaw regulations an individual may need to be aware of based on the activity that they're undertaking. So whether it's an animal owner, someone who's sheltering in the parks, a business owner, a landowner, or tenant, all of those things.
Yeah, I think that is really important in informing how we move forward, is just understanding that there's so many other points of contact with the public, and that I guess this bylaw is, I mean, words are important, and I certainly think that there's value in having staff come back, especially with regards to that, what was presented today in the delegation, and understanding whether or not there's other implications to incorporating those changes. But I think the work that really needs to come out of this, and I know this is not news to our staff, but maybe just saying this for the public, is really around making sure that people understand where we're going, the policy that has informed council's decisions, and just that everyone in the community has both rights and responsibilities when it comes to our open park spaces, and that we can communicate that in a way that's easy to understand and does not require someone having a good grasp on legal language that's outlined in the bylaw. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. Councillor Warren. It's okay.
Going on, sorry.
Is that better?
Great. Thank you, Mayor. One of the pieces of feedback was around the temporary shelters asking for that, to not be left unattended. I'm just wondering if staff can give the rationale if those shelters are up during the times that are permitted, what the rationale is with having that language that they must not be left unattended, particularly due to the reasons that are expressed around having to go to the bathroom and, a multitude of other things.
Thank you very much. So law is often written in a way that is very black and white. So if you can imagine a bylaw officer coming to a tent and somebody not being there, and they're there for 5 minutes, or they come back 20 minutes later and the person still isn't there, like, going to the washroom is not something that would result in any type of enforcement. The intention around the not having the tent being vacant is you're leaving something that could potentially be an attractant within a park space that is accessed by the public. And so it's just a matter of, when we were looking at other city bylaws and finding that type of clause, it was really about minimizing the potential of somebody going into those spaces or accessing those spaces, or something happening when those spaces are left unattended, specifically potentially around things like fire, or just attractants in general. So that was the piece. At the same time, like, this is definitely something that we can look at when we come back with the next staff report, if that's what council would choose to do. Those are just risk considerations that council would need to deliberate and make the decision on, as to whether or not the potential risk that you think my officers would be enforcing on somebody who's going to the washroom versus the potential risk of leaving a site or multiple sites on multiple park locations unattended for a longer period of time. So bathroom breaks are not a challenge. And my officers aren't out at night. We don't have 24/7 officers in the city of Courtenay. So really, it's more just if you're going to be sheltering in the park, we hope that you're able to stay with your belongings, to stay with your tent, to make sure that it is safe as much as humanly possible.
Thanks for that. I guess some of the concerns that have been expressed is that, you know, and maybe in future we will have, you know, we will expand our hours. Also currently, you know, on a long weekend, you see that people put up shelters and they stay there because there's no one to enforce. And I guess this is, you know, one of the several recommendations that I think really does need to be looked at because yeah, I mean, for the reasons that have been expressed. So I guess I'm leaning to what Councillor Hillian is talking about, having a look at some of the feedback that we've received, but I also hear what our city manager is saying, that we need to be specific and around what areas we're going to look at. And I guess that brings me to, it is a long list and of recommendations, and just to be honest, I can't see how we would be you know, adjusting the bylaw with this list of recommendations. There will be reasons why that can't happen. So I guess you know, I mean, we don't have a Q&A here, but I guess also my concern is that if we go through the process of looking at some of the recommendations, perhaps making some changes, but we don't check off the laundry list, you know, what's going to happen at that point when we're trying to do the best that we can. And also recognizing that we're a municipality and that many of the recommendations in this list, I understand that the system has changed, but in an ideal world, we would have people who have physical disabilities and mobility issues and who are seniors being cared for. And, you know, the recommendations are kind of going to our capacity as a municipality to deal with these huge systemic issues that we just don't have the means to do. So, yeah, so I guess I'm in favor of taking a look at some of these things for sure. And I guess I agree with, and, you know, in principle, I agree with most or all of these, but it's what can we do to make it work with what we're dealing with. So I'll let other people talk and think about things some more. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. And I see we've got some more lights on. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I guess just running off of what Councillor Moran was saying, in principle, a lot of these ideas make sense on paper. I think in practicality, it could lead us down a really difficult road. And I think what we're confusing here, again, like I said last time, is this bylaw actually isn't designed to solve the major issue we have. It's to cope with the smaller issues that are falling out of it. And I would suggest that this bylaw, that the part of it that governs sheltering in parks, needs to be put in place to set these clear boundaries that we have as a community about what our community is going to look like, and what is in fact appropriate use of common space. I think the real work that needs to be done around homelessness and mental health and drug addiction is coming up with real solutions. And, you know, if we change some wording in this bylaw, I don't think it's necessarily going to improve people's situation. And I find it hard to believe that if we start allowing camp-like situations in parks, that you know, we're actually helping the problem, and in fact maybe creating other problems. So I'm actually in favor of going ahead with this bylaw as it's written and doubling down on our work to get proper solutions around mental health, drug addiction services, and housing. And I think that's what we need to be focusing our energy on right now. I think we need this bylaw put through so that we don't end up with a horrible situation where camps are getting set up in our parks, which I frankly don't see as serving a homeless population. So if I get an opportunity, I'm happy to give third reading tonight, but I'll leave it for the rest of the council to comment.
All right, thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor, okay, yeah, sorry, I'm. All right, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I don't actually, I disagree with Councillor Frisch. I don't think there is a debate. The law is the law. People are allowed to shelter in parks because we have massive system failure and there is no housing. I think that we can ensure that our laws are aligned with things that we say that we're aligned with: equity, reconciliation, human rights, supporting people with disabilities, a compassionate, empathetic line. I think this is the most of what I see here from the staff is a balanced approach. I think the majority of these recommendations in the presentation that we had tonight, I see as quite small amendments. There are some policy directions that staff have indicated we need to provide some direction on, which I think that's where our work lies. I support Councillor Morin in that the amendments that are established in the drafted motion for us that staff sent us for the referral motion, I am in favor of those. And then I think where our work lies truly is in these policy directions around daytime sheltering, health issues, and cannabis consumption or designated areas for smoking. Those three policy areas, I think those are fair. We haven't had a lot of time to talk about those things. I haven't seen a ton of research. We've seen the community step forward and share their opinion. And I would like to see the municipal stance on liability as it relates to those three issues. So.
Yeah. Sorry, give me 1 second here. Yeah.
Could I request a short recess to discuss a in-camera procedural issue, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, can I make a motion to go in camera, please?
Do you
Well,
need a
I don't know.
seconder?
Do I have to provide that if it's an in-camera, but how can I talk about an in-camera?
Go in camera to see if it's, to prove that it's.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you. And I think Councillor McCollum seconded it.
Yes.
Madam Clerk, you're.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the section, but for the consideration of whether something should be in camera or not would be the motion on the floor. I'm not sure if our members here.
So Councillor McCollum, it's just, yeah, so it'd be the motion that you're seconding is to consider if an item is an in-camera item or not. Section 91N. All right, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that or one opposed. That passes, so we're gonna go in camera. Yeah, so we'll have to clear the gallery for right now. Yep.
Want to stop the live stream.